Hey everyone, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for helping me reach 100 subscribers. I honestly couldn't have done this without your love, support, and constant encouragement. Every like, comment, and subscribe means a lot to me. Now let's keep this journey going. Our next target is 200 subscribers, and I know we can do it together. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's grow as a family. Thank you once again. Before setting sail, Luffy finds a badly injured dog and, in true Luffy fashion, decides she's going to be his first crewmate. But this dog isn't just an ordinary animal. She has a hidden identity and a mysterious past. As the Straw Hats grow stronger and face new adventures, the crew slowly learns who she really is. While everyone accepts her, Zoro in particular begins to develop a strong connection with her. What starts as curiosity slowly turns into something deeper. The story mixes adventure, emotional bonding, mystery about the OC's true nature, and a slow burn romance with Zoro. Disclaimer. This story do not belong to me. The author is 1,000 Miles by Angelflutest. Respect to author.
Chapter 1. Soft whimpers escaped as I licked at the cut on my leg, wincing as the blood continued to stain my white fur. "Are you okay?" I looked up in surprise as a young man crouched down next to me. He was wearing a red vest and a straw hat with black hair and a scar under his left eye. I growled lowly at him for a moment, watching with caution as he reached over and lightly petted my neck and back, causing me to relax a little. "Let me see, girl." I moved my head, watching him closely as he picked up my paw and looked at it. "Come on." I tilted my head, curiosity taking over as I allowed him to pick me up, my shoulders and head hanging over his shoulder while he started walking. As he walked, I looked at the townspeople as they barely glanced at us. The few brave enough to make eye contact with me quickly looked away in fear. Finally we walked into some sort of building. "Hey Rose." "Luffy, what do you have there?" I felt him shrug before placing me, surprisingly gentle, on a table. "I don't know what she is, but she's hurt." I heard the woman sigh before soft hands ran through my fur for a moment before the feeling of a warm liquid being poured into the wounds. I whined loudly at the slight burn. "I know, sweetie, it'll help though." "Luffy, why don't you pet her or something?" He nodded before scratching behind my ear and down my neck as Rose wrapped the wounds carefully before declaring I was going to be okay. I nuzzled her hand softly in thanks before standing up, testing the pressure for a moment before jumping down and wagging my tail at Luffy. "Yes, she's thankful." "Yeah." He smiled at me before deciding on something. "You're going to be part of my crew, girl." Rose looked at Luffy in shock. "Luffy, you can't have a dog as part of your crew." "Yes, I can." He smiled at me again, rubbing my head lightly. "You'll be part of my crew, won't you?" I barked at him, figuring I owed him since he saved my life. Following him out of the building, he showed me his boat, nothing more than a sailboat, but it would have to do for now. Hopping in, I curled into a ball, watching as he pushed us away from the dock and we were sailing away, the island getting smaller and smaller until it disappeared. We have a problem." Looking up, I realized, with great annoyance, that we were sinking. "Come on, get in." Seeing Luffy in a barrel, I sighed before shaking my head and climbing in the barrel as Luffy pulled the lid on and we were floating. "Well, this is one way to start an adventure, huh?" I gave him a look before sighing and licking his cheek before falling asleep. I was woken up as the barrel was rolled around. Straining my ears, I could hear voices but couldn't make out what they were saying. Turning my head, I looked at an obviously asleep Luffy. Licking his face, I tried to get him to wake up, only for him to snore and continue to sleep. Sighing, I waited and braced myself as we were rolled around again before it was set up right. I growled and Luffy opened one eye before stretching and breaking us out of the barrel. Rolling on the ground, I stretched and looked around to see a kid wearing a white button-up shirt, pink hair, and was wearing glasses looking at us in complete and utter terror. I tilted my head at him before spotting one pirate on the ground and two others looking in shock at Luffy. "Who the hell are you guys?" Stretching, I walked over and sniffed at the kid, causing him to flinch, obviously thinking I was going to bite him or something of the sort. Shaking my head, I looked back over at Luffy. "No, who are you?" I growled as they yelled at my captain, who just looked at the guy on the ground. "That guy's gonna catch cold if he sleeps there, you know." "You did that." I growled again, causing the two pirates to look at me before they shoved a sword in front of Luffy's face. "Are you toyin' with us even when you know we're pirates?" Luffy turned and looked at the kid while I continued to growl at the pirates. "Man, I'm hungry. You got any food?" The two pirates raised their swords to attack Luffy while his back was turned. Jumping up, I knocked both the men off their feet and kicked them in the head, effectively knocking them out. "Good girl." I yipped at Luffy as he turned back to the kid. "Who are you two?" Luffy smirked. "I'm Monkey D. Luffy. And this is my dog." "Nice to meet ya." I walked next to my captain as we set to find some food, a little surprised when the kid grabbed onto Luffy's arm. There are still lots more of them up on deck. Come on, this way. Walking into a closet, Luffy screamed in joy as I barked. Jumping down, we started filling our empty stomachs with the food we had found. My name is Colby. You're Luffy, right? I ignored the kid while biting into some fruit, vaguely wondering how long it was going to take to get my strength back. That was incredible just now. How did you and your dog do that? Focusing on chowing down, I ignored Colby's backstory. Feeling my stomach starting to protest, I sat next to Luffy, setting my head on his knee as we looked at Colby. Man, you're dumb and stupid. You're brutally honest. If you don't like it, then run away. I smirked as Colby shook his head, screaming no way, saying something about how he was afraid of his captain finding him. Luffy smiled and placed his hand on my head, his thumb lightly rubbing under my ear. Oh, you're a wimp, too. I barked a laugh before working on climbing the stairs so I could get out of the pantry. Taking a seat near the door, I watched Luffy and Colby, enjoying the feeling of my strength slowly coming back to me. I knew it would be several days before my powers fully returned. If only I had the courage to drift the ocean in a barrel. There's actually something I want to do, too. What compelled you to set out onto the sea, Luffy? I laid down on the wooden floor as Luffy grinned at Colby. I'm gonna be the king of the pirates. This naturally sent Colby into a slight panic. If I had been in my real form, I would have been laughing at the kid. King of the pirates. Yep. Are you serious? Yeah. Wait, you're a pirate, Luffy. I covered my muzzle with my paws, wondering how it took Colby this long to figure out that Luffy was a pirate. Yep. What about your crew? I shook my head, closing my eyes for a moment. Just my dog up there right now. I'm looking for one. Colby froze for a moment, causing me to roll over laughing at him. King of the pirates is the title given to the person who obtains everything in this world. That means seeking the great treasure of wealth, fame, and power, the One Piece. Yup. I yipped out of excitement. I knew where we were headed and I couldn't wait. Yup. Pirates all over the world are after that treasure. Me too. I shook my head, stretching some more. No way. No way, no way, no way. Absolutely no way. There's no way you can stand at the apex of this great pirate era. No way. No way. I was grateful when Luffy finally hit Colby. Why did you hit me? Just because. But it's all right. I'm used to it now. I shook my head again, my tail wagging lazily behind me. It's not about whether I can or not. I'm gonna do it because I want to. I've decided to be the king of the pirates, so if I die fighting for that, that's fine with me. Now, then, my belly's full. She's getting impatient up there. Guess we'll go get us a boat. I wonder if they'll give me one if I ask. Hopefully they're generous. Right, girl? I yipped and nodded, keeping close to him as he opened the door. I was so focused on waiting for my captain to walk I didn't realize Colby had asked if he could join the Marines. I turned and looked at him the same time as Luffy did. Marines. Yes. Catching bad guys is my dream. It's been my dream ever since I was little. Do you think I can do it? How should I know? I shook my head, turning back to the door Luffy had closed when he turned around. No. I'll do it. If I'm gonna be a cabin boy for the rest of my life, then I'll break out of here and catch even Captain Olivia. No, Olivia. At that the ceiling caved in, creating a lot of dust that made me cough lightly. You're gonna team up with him and his dog to catch who? I growled at being called a dog, waiting for the dust to clear so I could see who just signed a death wish. As the dust cleared I barked back a laugh at the pig in front of me. The woman, if you could call her that, was short and painfully overweight with black hair that wasn't taken care of. White 10-gallon hat sat on her head, dark red lipstick making her lips seem smaller than necessary. She had a red scarf around her thick neck, a pink plaid shirt with a blue captain's jacket that was obviously too small for her large frame. A purple scarf held her gun around her waist. She was wearing white pants that had me shaking my head. She carried a spiked club in her right hand that was covered in multicolored rings. Hearing ripping, I looked up to see swords sticking through the door near Luffy's head. She looked at Luffy and I for a moment, an annoying smirk on her face. You don't seem to be Zoro, the pirate hunter. I tilted my head at the unfamiliar name. Zoro. Luffy looked at me and I shook my head as the pirate screamed at Colby. Colby, who's the most beautiful of all on these seas? I snorted at her question. Oh, of course that would be. Luffy was quick to interrupt, asking what we were both thinking. Who's this big chunky lady? Everyone's mouth dropped at his question. I just smirked, taking a seat as I waited to see if this woman was worth fighting or not. Finally the woman seemed to snap out of her shock.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
You runt. As she raised her club, I stood up and Luffy wrapped one of his arms under my stomach. As she brought her club down, Luffy jumped, landing in front of Colby. I wagged my tail at the kid as he looked at us. Let's go. Luffy grabbed Colby's hand and jumped us out of the pantry and onto the deck. Placing me on my feet, I looked at the pirates as Luffy stood up. He smirked at the pirates as the closest one started swinging at us. Dropping to the floor, I watched as Luffy dodged the attacks with ease before knocking out the pirate and turning and doing the same to the one that tried to attack from behind. Hearing footsteps, I looked up to see 4 pirates were running over to Luffy. Smirking, I stood up and ran at them. Jumping up, I dug my teeth into the biggest one's neck, blood staining my mouth as my claws tore into his chest before I jumped off and attacked another one from behind. He dropped to the floor just as Luffy tossed something that resembled a person over my head and taking out the 2 remaining pirates. Looking up, I growled at the amount of pirates behind Luffy who took off running. It's not fair to attack all at once. Seeing him grab the mast, I smirked and walked over to Colby, sitting next to the frightened boy, watching Luffy slingshot himself at the pirates, Colby freaking out at my side. Luffy, what are you? Me. I laughed as he stretched out his cheek. I'm a rubber person. A rubber person? You can't be serious. Feeling something behind me, I turned and saw the captain. Shaking my head, I debated if I could reach her jugular from my position or not. You've eaten a devil's fruit, haven't you? Yeah, the gum fruit. I see. I'd heard the rumors, but I guess they really do exist. You and your dog seem pretty skilled. You a bounty hunter? I'm a pirate. A pirate? Huh, all by yourself. Luffy shook his head while I backed up, seriously debating if I should just take her out or not. It's just her and I right now, but I'll find some more sooner or later. Yeah, 10 crewmen sounds good to me. Ah, so you're a pirate too, huh? Then that means you and me are enemies, huh? I scoffed, crouching down as Colby said something about us leaving. Shaking my head, I continued to growl at the woman pirate. In these waters, she's the most. Colby went silent, amusing his captain. I'm the most what? The most ugly, cragged old hag ever. I stopped growling as I dissolved into laughter, my body shaking as the pirate's eyes darkened for a moment, Luffy laughing loudly behind me. What did you say? I'm going to join the Marines. And then I'm gonna beat up pirates. Do you even know what you're saying? I stopped laughing and glared at the woman while she argued with Colby. Next thing I know, she raised her club and managed to hit Luffy, causing me to shake my head and drag Colby away from the impending fight by his shirt. Stop. What if Luffy gets hurt? I gave the kid a look as Luffy knocked the woman into the ocean. Hearing a noise, I looked over to see a marine ship. Growling, I barked at Luffy as cannon fire started. Let's go. Luffy grabbed me while pulling Colby into a boat. Dropping into the ocean, we took off. Shaking my fur, I got comfortable and placed my head on Luffy's leg, falling asleep as my captain washed the blood out of my fur with salt water. Chapter 2. Hey, wake up. I growled before opening my eyes to see we had made port on an island. With a shake of my head, I stood up and jumped onto the dock, my legs swaying lightly before I found my balance again. We made it. The marine base city. I shook my head before walking in front of my captain and Colby, confused but not fazed as the townspeople gave me a fearful look. Hey, why are the people scared of you? I shrugged one of my shoulders, slowing down to walk behind Luffy and in front of Colby, not wanting any trouble as Luffy paid for some sort of fruit, tossing it back to me. Biting into it, I closed my eyes at the sweet taste, tilting my head as Luffy asked if Zoro was around. The townspeople freaked out. It would seem the name, Zoro, is taboo here. Luffy shrugged and we continued on our way. Well, let's check out the base anyway. You're gonna be a marine, right? Why yes, but I'm not really ready yet. Rumor has it a guy named Captain Morgan is at this base, and again the townspeople freaked out, leaving me to wonder what was going on in this little village. Luffy, naturally, brushed off the weird behavior. What a funny town. It's strange, I understand Zoro, but why are they afraid of a marine captain's name? I suddenly feel uneasy about this. I nodded in agreement as we walked up to look up at the giant base. I guess this is where we part ways, Luffy. Rolling my eyes at the boy, I turned and watched as Luffy lifted himself up to look over the wall. Whimpering, I pouted at him for a moment, smiling when he took the hint and reached down and picked me up so I could sit on the wall. Curling my tail around me, I observed the man in the middle of the courtyard. He was tied to a post with his arms stretched back in a way that looked painful. He was wearing a black hood, a white shirt, a green haramaki, and black pants. I tilted my head with one look at Luffy. I knew what he wanted, so I jumped down off the wall, causing Colby to start screaming for me to come back. As I approached the man, I figured to be this Zoro person. He started talking, a slight shiver running down my spine at his deep voice. Hey, you guys, you're an eyesore. He looked up and I realized he had green eyes and 3 gold earrings in his left ear. Get lost. Shaking my head, I continued my cautious walk, knowing the bounty hunter was watching me in curiosity. At the sound of a light thump, I looked back to see a young girl shushing Luffy and Colby before jumping off the wall and walking past me, a small package in her small hands. Curiosity took over from the unique smell coming from the package, so I walked after her, not missing how the top of my back hit the top of her head. Dipping my head, I sniffed at the package. What? The girl smiled at the attention. You must be hungry. I made you some rice balls. I turned my head, not fond of rice balls, as the girl offered it to him. Only for Zoro to yell at her. Shaking my head, I could tell he was either trying to protect her, or was putting on a false facade of toughness. Hearing the gate open, I looked over to see 3 men walking over. Don't be such a bully. I growled lowly, keeping my body in front of the girl. The blonde was obviously a threat. The 2 marines flanking him I assumed were his bodyguards. You seem surprisingly well, Roronoa Zoro. He looked down at me as I growled at him, my tail straight and my ears back. Who let this mud in here? Get out of here. I took a bite out of his ankle as he tried to kick me. He yelled in pain while instructing one of the Marines to shoot me. The man sighed and walked over to me as my growls got louder in warning. The Marine swung back and before I could bite him he caught my stomach sending me rolling into the wall under Luffy while another Marine was throwing the little girl over the wall. Luckily Luffy caught her. Whimpering I tried to catch my breath as my captain dropped to the ground next to me and bent down to pick me up like he had when he saved me. I got you girl. He carried me over to Zoro who looked at us like we were crazy. I hear you're a bad guy. Are you still here? I caught my breath and jumped out of Luffy's arms and sat directly in front of the bounty hunter, my tail wagging as he glanced down at me before looking at Luffy. What's with the dog? Nothing important. Luffy turned to leave when Zoro called for him to wait and glanced at the pile of rice from the girl's rice ball. Could you pick that up for me? Luffy bent down and picked it up while I sniffed at it. You're gonna eat this. It's mostly a mud ball now. Just shut up and give it here. I growled at Zoro in warning at his tone while Luffy tossed him the rice. I smirked when the bounty hunter gagged a little. Told you so. It was good. Thanks for the food. Luffy nodded as we walked back to the wall. He glanced down at me before picking me up and jumping over the wall. I like him. I looked up at my captain, shaking my head lightly while following him to find Colby. I was quickly becoming annoyed with the looks I was receiving from the townspeople we passed as we finally found Colby and the little girl who explained that Zoro was tied up after protecting her from the Marine captain's son's dog that had been terrorizing the townspeople, thus explaining why they were scared of me. But, she's not aggressive, unless you're a threat. To prove Luffy's point I walked over and sat in front of the girl, licking her cheek as she scratched my ear, only pausing my affection when the voice of the blonde that made the mistake of kicking me filtered through the walls of the building we were next to. Growling I turned my head and walked into the building, quickly discovering it was a tavern. Feeling someone scratch my back lightly I knew Luffy was behind me. I'm hungry. Let us all eat for free. Hey, bring me some booze. Quit dawdling. Hurry it up. I growled as we listened to the blonde while watching as the woman behind the bar poured him a glass of wine. Oh yes, I've been bored lately, so I've decided to execute Zoro tomorrow. At that one sentence I felt a surge of power that had me pushing off the wood floor in a run, easily outrunning my captain before kicking off the floor and onto the table, my claws digging into the blonde's chest as Luffy punched him in the face, forcing my claws to swipe sideways as I landed back on the table. Turning I crouched low, growling at the man as he screamed about getting hurt. What the hell are you doing? Luffy moved to attack again, but I moved in front of him as Colby held him back. Why you and your dog attacked me? I'm Captain Morgan's son, you know. So what? I barked in agreement, wanting nothing more than to rip this guy's throat out. I'm gonna tell my dad and he's gonna execute you and eat your dog. I growled, resisting the urge to jump on him. Fight me yourself. Jumping off the table I continued to growl, knowing there wasn't much anyone could do to stop me if I tore out his throat. But the coward scrambled out the door with his Marines. Shaking my head I walked out, not in the mood to deal with the townspeople that were now even more afraid of me. Walking to the base, I didn't bother cleaning my paws like I normally would have. After a few minutes I found a hole under the wall I crawled through and walked over to Zoro to take a seat in front of him as we stared at each other. You again, where's your friend? I shrugged, watching him as his eyes scanned down my fur in a way that would make me uncomfortable if I was in my true form. What happened to your paws? You injured? I shook my head, glancing at the gate as it squeaked open. Moving I took silent steps as I padded next to the pole Zoro was tied to. As the captain's son walked by I couldn't hold in the snickering as I spotted him holding his hands to his chest as he limped past us. I waited until he was in the building before walking and sitting back in front of Zoro. You attacked him. I nodded, my ears twitching as I heard the light grunt from Luffy as he jumped over the wall and walked towards us. You again? You sure have lots of free time. I'll untie you, so join my crew. Say what? I nodded, my tail lightly hitting the ground. I'm looking for people to join my pirate crew. Forget it. Me, stooping to a criminal's level. Screw that. What's wrong with being a pirate? Pirates are despicable. As if I'd wanna be one. Oh, come on. You're already known as an evil bounty hunter. I scoffed, rocking lightly in boredom. People can say whatever they want, but I ain't done anything I regret. I will live through this and accomplish what I want.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
I sighed, laying down. Yeah, but I've decided you're gonna join me. Quit deciding on your own. I hear you use swords. Yeah, but that stupid son took my stuff. I'll go get it back for you. I yipped in agreement. What? Watching Luffy take off running, I sighed and shook my head, barking at him as Zoro yelled he was going the wrong way. All of a sudden Luffy shot past us with his gum-gum rocket, causing Zoro to gape at him and me to laugh. Who the hell is that guy? I barked again, patting around the bounty hunter while we waited for Luffy. Stopping in front of Zoro, sitting back on my heels, I tried to balance to maybe cut the swordsman loose, but I couldn't keep my balance long enough, so I settled with laying by his feet. Watching as Colby climbed over the wall and tried to untie Zoro. Shaking my head, I concentrated on the power growing in my body. Feeling a sudden surge, I stood up and took off running, knowing I needed to get away from them if I was going to finally transform back. Running through town, carefully stealing pieces of clothing the merchants had for sale, ducking behind a few buildings, making sure I wasn't being followed before biting back a growl as bones broke and reformed, my fur falling off in clumps, pain surging through my body before the sudden relief. Looking down, I couldn't help but grin at the human hands I was looking at, carefully wrapping the gauze around my chest before slipping on the white tank top and black pants before walking out of the alleyway. Spotting my reflection in a window, I paused. Seeing my true self for the first time in almost a year was a bit of a shock. My white hair in a tangled mess, and needing a good brushing, but at least it was clean, pale skin, yellow eyes revealing what I was. Hearing gunshots, I turned and ran to the base, my bare feet slapping against the cobblestone before reaching the wall, pressing my right foot against the wall, using my momentum to jump up and sit on the wall in time to see Luffy block bullets with his body and shoot the bullets back at the Marines. Oh Lord. Chapter 3. Sliding off the wall, I landed softly on the ground. Walking around the guards, I stopped next to Luffy, who was celebrating that Zoro was going to join the crew, while keeping his swords away from him. Luffy, Captain, you need to give him his swords. I really don't want to die by the Marines today. Luffy turned and blinked at me. Who are you? Are you my dog? I laughed and nodded. Yes, I'm the dog you saved. But I can explain all of that later. Right now, give Zoro his swords. He nodded while handing Zoro his swords, who somehow managed to cut himself free and block the Marines in a matter of seconds. I smirked, admitting to myself that Zoro was a little impressive. Hearing a gasp, I looked over at whom I assumed to be Captain Morgan, a strange-looking man, tan skin, blonde hair, a piece of metal covering his jaw. Raising an eyebrow, I focused back on Zoro, who was looking at the Marines, who looked scared to death. Move and you're dead. Zoro looked at Luffy and I while still blocking the Marines. I'll be a pirate. I promise you that. I'm officially a criminal, now that I've fought the Marines. But I'll tell you this right now. I'm only going to fulfill my ambition. I tilted my head a little. Ambition. To be the world's greatest swordsman. If I wind up having to give that up, you'd better accept responsibility and apologize to me. I looked at Luffy, who was smiling. The world's greatest swordsman. That sounds great. The king of the pirates would need no less than that on his crew. Zoro smirked around his sword. You sure talk big. At this point, whether it's as a criminal or whatever else, I will spread my name throughout the world. I heard Captain Morgan say something to his men, telling them to slaughter all of us. I shook my head as Luffy told Zoro to duck as he swung his leg back. Zoro ducked down and Luffy kicked the Marines into a heap. Impressive, Captain. Luffy smirked at me. The three of us turned to look at Captain Morgan as he started yelling at his men again. This is a direct order. Everyone who spouted weakness just now, must now shoot themselves in the head. Rolling my eyes, I looked at Luffy. I think I got this one. Go ahead. I nodded, feeling my claws extend. I took off running. Jumping, I moved to punch the Marine captain, only to be blocked by the axe connected to his right arm. Smirking, I swung my body over the giant piece of metal, kicking Morgan in the head. He returned by grabbing my leg and attempting to throw me off. Reaching down, I dug my claws into his arm, growling lowly until he used his foot to force me off his arm before throwing me at Luffy, who caught me with ease. I'll take it from here. I nodded, brushing myself off as Luffy charged Morgan. Hearing a gun click, I looked over to see Morgan's son pointing a gun at me. Really? I smirked. Ducking down, I kicked his feet out from under him and grabbed the gun, pointing it at his chest in warning. Try anything and I'll kill you. Hearing a thump, I looked over to see Morgan on the ground with Zoro close to him and Luffy facing me. The only thing I could figure was that Zoro killed Morgan protecting Luffy, who was about to protect me. Smirking, I kicked the son in the head and walked over to Luffy, hearing some of the Marines say something about Captain Morgan being defeated, and that we were insane, which I had to agree with. If anyone else still wants to catch us, come forward. I glanced at Zoro before turning back to the Marines to see them throwing their swords and hats in the air in celebration. Huh, everyone's happy their captain's been beaten. I nodded at Luffy, ignoring Colby as Zoro collapsed. Sighing, I pulled his right arm over my shoulder and let him lean against me. Guys, we need to get some food in him. Luffy nodded, showing us the way out of the base into the restaurant that the little girl and her mother ran. After we explained what had happened, she had us plenty of food prepared. We ate in relative silence, except for Luffy and Zoro, who had no table manners to speak of. Finally we were all stuffed and Zoro made the mistake in asking about a crew. Luffy gave him a blank look. You said you were in the middle of gathering a crew. To be king of the pirates, you must have a good number gathered. Luffy shrugged. Just you and her. I laughed at Zoro's shocked face. Huh, then, yep, just the three of us. Shaking my head, I stood up and asked the owner where the restroom was. She pointed me in the right direction. Stepping in, I took a deep breath, making sure I had a good hold on this form before walking out to see the Marines and Luffy telling them about Colby, only to be punched in the face. Shaking my head I walked over to Zoro. You might want to grab him, he doesn't know when to stop. He nodded and grabbed Luffy, telling him that was enough and we were told to leave. Walking down to the dock I smiled at Luffy. So, what's your name anyway? Christina. He nodded. Reaching out he helped me step into the boat. Sitting down I relaxed as we finally set sail and left the island behind us. So, I looked over at Zoro. What are you? A werewolf? I shrugged like it was no big deal. Luffy grinned and Zoro stared in shock. That is awesome. I laughed at him. Yeah, just a little. Chapter 4. We were floating for days, my stomach was growling pitifully. Luffy hung off the side of the boat complaining. I was curled into a ball on the floor of the boat. When the hell are we gonna reach land? Zoro turned to me and I shrugged before looking at Luffy. Who knows? We're just going with the wind and waves, after all. We sat in silence for a moment before Zoro got frustrated with Luffy. Isn't it kind of weird that someone trying to be king of the pirates doesn't even have any navigational skills? It's not weird, I just drifted around. But aren't you a bounty hunter who wandered the high seas? Ignoring the pair I sat up and looked at the water, sighing I turned so my back was to the arguing pair before lifting my shirt over my head. What are you doing? I couldn't help but smirk a little at Zoro's concerned tone. Going fishing, you have to be naked to fish. I sighed, working on my pants and folding them into a neat little pile. I'm going to shift and I don't want my clothes to get ruined. There was silence behind me as I sighed and let my body shift. The guys gasped as they witnessed something very few people have ever seen. After the shift was finished I was looking at the pair in my wolf form. Wow. Smirking I jumped into the water, searching for something to eat. Seeing a shadow pass over the water I kicked myself to the surface in time to catch Luffy's hat before it hit the water. Thanks Christina. I nodded, swimming closer to the boat so he could grab it. Once the hat was back with its rightful owner I turned my head and gave Zoro a look while my feet kicked to keep me above the water. He sighed and gently picked me up out of the water. No fish. I shook my head, splashing him as I shook out my coat. One glance at Luffy and it was obvious he was zoned out as he looked at his hat. Shrugging I let myself shift back, quickly changing back into my clothes before looking over at a blushing Zoro. What? Nothing. I laughed lightly at him. Sorry, my kind is more comfortable without clothes, less to worry about when shifting. He nodded, obviously still embarrassed, so he turned to look at Luffy to avoid eye contact with me. Hey, you're gonna drop it again if you space out. Isn't it important? Luffy slipped the hat back on his head as he seemed to come back to us. Yeah, man, I'm hungry. Hearing a chirp we looked up to see a black figure flying above us. Let's eat it. We looked at Luffy. What? How? Luffy just smiled. Leave it to me. He reached up and shot himself at the bird. Oh lord, I see. All of a sudden Luffy was screaming. Looking closely we realized the bird had caught Luffy in its mouth. Sighing we grabbed the oars and chased after him. Moron, what the hell are you doing? We sighed, keeping an eye on our captain until we heard someone yelling. Hey, stop, you there, stop, oh for the love of God. Zoro sighed. I can't stop. Jump in on your own. We went flying by and the trio somehow managed to get on. I'm impressed you got on. Are you trying to run us over? I rolled my eyes, until they pulled out their swords. Hey, stop the boat. We're members of Buggy the Clown's crew. This boat is ours now. Zoro turned and glared at the men. Stopping the boat he jumped at the men, beating the 3 men up before making them row for us. We had no idea you were the famous pirate hunter Zoro. Forgive our rudeness. Zoro continued to glare at them while he sat in front of me. Thanks to you guys, I lost sight of my friend. Just keep paddling straight ahead. Yes sir. I rolled my eyes looking up at the sky. Knowing Luffy, he'll manage something once he spots land. Zoro nodded in agreement before something dawned on him. Who's this Buggy character? The pirates looked at us confused. You've never heard of Buggy the Clown? Nope. I shivered as one of the pirates stared at me, causing Zoro to glare at him and move so he was fully blocking me. He's the head of our pirate ship. He's eaten one of the devil fruits, and is just an all-around terrifying person. Chapter 5. Hey, I looked over at Zoro, still hiding next to him. Yeah, you might want to transform or shift or whatever it is that you do. I laughed. It's called shifting, and I won't, not until it's absolutely necessary. Seeing the port coming into view we sighed. It's about time. Tying up the boat we climbed onto the dock just in time for something to explode. What's that explosion? One of Buggy's beloved buggy balls. I looked at the pirates in mild curiosity. Buggy balls. I sighed, walking over to Zoro I patted his shoulder. I bet Luffy has something to do with it. He nodded, watching as I started to walk towards the smoke. Hearing yelling I grabbed Zoro's arm and led the way into an empty building. Climbing the stairs I felt my nose twitch at the smell of beer that seemed to surround us. Shaking my head I finally found the roof. Not surprised to see pirates everywhere, a small group about to attack a young woman with orange hair wearing a blue and white striped shirt, and Luffy in a small cement cage. Zoro sighed before walking over and blocking the pirates with his swords while I searched Luffy's cage for a way to unlock it. Shaking my head I gave up and took a seat next to the cage. Zoro turned to Luffy. First some bird runs off with you and now you're inside a cage. It's pretty interesting, actually. I scoffed as the pirates began muttering about Zoro. I'm sure it is, Captain. Sighing, I allowed my body to shift. Picking up my clothes in my mouth, I placed them in Luffy's lap. Knowing I could pull the cage if it really came to that, hearing Buggy call out Zoro, I sighed. Knowing this was going to turn into a fight, sitting down I watched Buggy charge Zoro, who cut straight through him. Hearing the pirates laugh, I growled lowly, watching as Bugging put himself together and stabbed Zoro in the side. I could hear Luffy screaming about the unfair shot, calling Buggy a big nose. The crowd of pirates fell silent as Buggy turned to us. Who's got a big nose? Buggy detached his arm and flung it at Luffy, who caught the blade in his mouth. I shook my head, making a mental note to find medical supplies for Zoro's injury. The sword broke apart in Luffy's mouth and Buggy's hand returned to him. Kick my ass. You're a real riot. All 4 of you are gonna die here, you know. How should I have my ass kicked in this situation? The pirates dissolved into laughter. I growled lowly at them until I heard Luffy laughing, causing me to look back at him. I refused to die. Run, Zoro. Chris. I growled at him and stepped in front of him to prove I wasn't going anywhere. The woman yelled something about us coming to save him and asking what he was going to do. Zoro smirked, causing me to become even more confused. All of a sudden Buggy attacked Zoro again. The two were matched evenly until Zoro cut through Buggy's middle and jumped through the opening. He ran over and pushed the cannon over so it was facing Buggy. Seeing Zoro down, I ran over as he was telling the woman to light the cannon. As she lit it, I felt Zoro throw an arm around my back and allowed me to drag him away from the cannon. Turning, we watched as the cannon went off. Chapter 6. Following after Zoro, I sighed. He wouldn't let me pull Luffy's cage and insisted he carry it. Hey, Zoro. You're hurt, you know. Just shut up and stay in there. I'm gonna do things my way. I shook my head and sat and watched as Luffy got stuck, glancing at the woman as she caught up to us. Who is this guy? Zoro panted, obviously exhausted. Luffy, who's she? Luffy gave us a blank look. Oh, she's our navigator. Zoro grunted again, obviously in pain. Turning, I shoved the woman out of the way as Zoro lifted Luffy's cage on his back and started walking. Taking careful steps, I followed after him. Somehow we managed to make it all the way to the ground, Zoro pulling the cage along while I shoved my shoulder against it to push it. As we were reaching a pet store, Zoro finally collapsed. Sighing, I walked around to look at him only to come face to face with a little white dog, who was guarding the store. We looked at each other for a moment before I shrugged and moved to lick Zoro's face, trying to get him up. What's with this dog? I looked up at Luffy, looked over at the dog and continued trying to get Zoro up, who finally sat up and patted my head. Hearing a clanking, we looked over to see Luffy rocking his cage over to the dog. Shaking my head, I let Zoro use my back to stand up and as a crutch to walk over and sit against the porch of the pet store. Hey, it doesn't move at all. What's wrong with him? I rolled my eyes at my captain. Hell if I care. It can do whatever it wants. I wonder if it's dead. Luffy was stupid enough to poke the dog in the head. It responded by biting his face. I growled at it, the fur on the back of my neck sticking up as I knelt close to the ground, preparing to fight the older and smaller dog. Finally it took the hint and let go, taking its seat while I continued to growl at it. Hearing a thump, I stopped and noticed both Zoro and Luffy were lying down. Shaking my head, I noticed our navigator had caught up to us. Taking my clothes from Luffy, I walked into an alley to shift and change before walking back to the group. Looking down, I watched as the dog ate the key to Luffy's cage. Luffy lunged and started shaking the dog. Sighing, I moved to stop him only to be stopped as an old man started yelling for Luffy to stop bullying Chow Chow, whom I could only assume to be the dog. Zoro looked up at the man as he walked over to us. Who are you, old man? I'm this town's mayor. Who are you? I sighed, about to say something when the mayor noticed Zoro's injury. My, what a terrible injury. I sighed, offering my hand to Zoro to get him moving again. Do you have somewhere we can take him, so he can rest and heal? The mayor nodded and led the way to a small house. Walking in, I helped him lay Zoro down on a bed, lifting his shirt to see the extent of the damage. Turning, I smiled at the mayor. Do you have a first aid kit? He nodded and brought over a small white box before leaving to give me room to work. Buggy did a number on you, Zoro. He sighed as I started cleaning the wound. Grabbing a needle and thread, I apologized before I started sewing him up. As I worked, he only occasionally let a small gasp or groan out. Other than those rare occasions, he was silent. Wrapping a thick gauze around his waist, I helped him lay back and told him to rest before walking outside. Feeling the ground shake, I looked around until I spotted a giant lion with a guy riding on it. Oh, I watched as Luffy and the guy talked, until the lion tore Luffy free of his cage, knocking him into a building. Keeping hidden, I watched as the lion turned to attack the pet food store. Growling under my breath, I let my wolf take over, feeling my body shift, becoming larger than my normal form. Walking around the building, I realized I was 10 times bigger than the little dog Chow Chow, who was barking at the lion. I growled and launched myself at the lion, my claws digging into his nose as I pushed myself over him and attacked his owner, pushing him back a few feet before he cursed at me and tossed me to the ground, where the lion swiped me to the side, its massive claws digging into my stomach. Rolling on the ground I growled and ran at the lion again as he knocked Chow Chow out of the way and destroyed the sign to the store. Jumping up again I clawed at his eyes, jumping when the beast raised its paw to knock me off. Turning I sunk my teeth in all 4 sets of claws into one of its ears, causing it to howl and thrash around. The man controlling the beast ran up and pulled on my fur trying to get me to let go. Clamping down harder as blood filled my mouth I refused to let go. Feeling something sharp dig into my back I let go and howled as the man ripped out his knife and the lion managed to shake me off. Falling several feet I hit the ground hard, only to be stepped on by the lion. Whimpering I clawed at the ground, trying to get out of the way as it slammed its paw down again. As it raised its paw again I rolled away from it, watching in horror as the pet food store was destroyed. Whimpering I felt arms picking me up. I looked up at Luffy as he carried me to the alley where my clothes were. "Stay here, Chris," I whimpered as he placed me on the ground and took off to find the lion and its owner. Sighing I held back a scream as my body shifted and I was able to pull on my clothes, trying not to think about how blood-soaked they were becoming. Pulling myself into the house Zoro was sleeping and I found the first aid kit, screaming as I cleaned my own wounds. "Here." I looked up in shock at Zoro, who was awake and looked much better, as he took a seat in front of me and grabbed the first aid kit from me. "Do you know what you're doing?" He shook his head no before telling me to let him see the worst of it. Sighing I lifted my shirt to reveal the deep cuts. "What happened to you?" Just when I was about to answer an explosion went off and the roof caved in. Zoro reached over and pulled me under him to protect me before shoving the pieces of wood off of us. "How are you two still alive?" We looked at our navigator before pulling apart from each other, the both of us wincing a little. Zoro stood and helped me up. We watched as the mayor decided he was going to fight Buggy on his own. Shaking my head I grabbed the gauze and started wrapping what I could reach as Zoro tied on his bandana, Nami asking about our injuries. "The injury to my name is much worse than the injury to my gut." I nodded in agreement, tying the gauze off before walking after the pair. "Our destination is the Grand Line. So we're gonna steal that map back now. Join our crew, Nami." I smirked at Luffy. "So her name's Nami, apparently." We watched her reaction to Luffy. "I'll never be a pirate. How about we team up for our common goal?" I shrugged and lead the way, my nose telling me where to go. Limping slightly I ignored the pain in my leg. As we came across the mayor about to be attacked by Buggy's separated hand, Luffy ran forward and caught the hand while catching the mayor who fainted. "I'm here to kick your ass, just like I promised." Chapter 7. I'm here to kick your ass just like I promised. I smirked as Buggy freaked out about Luffy blocking his severed hand. "Straw Hat, how dare you just come waltzing back here," to Captain Buggy. I shook my head. Does he really have to refer to himself in the third person? Nami turned and looked at Zoro and I. "Listen, all I want is the map and the treasure." "Yeah, I know." Rolling my eyes as the mayor told us to stay out of it, only for Luffy to knock him out, again. Finally, Nami didn't share in my enthusiasm. "What the hell, why did you attack the mayor? He was in the way." I chuckled at Luffy's answer as Zoro answered telling him it was good thinking. "No doubt this old man plans to die otherwise. This is for the best." I shook my head as Nami started screaming at Luffy, who ignored her and walked over to face Buggy. "Alright, here goes, big nose." I laughed at his insult as the pirates looked at us in shock. Seeing the pirates loading a buggy ball, jumping back I watched as Luffy blew himself up and caught the cannonball before shooting it back at the buggy pirates. Watching the building explode I sighed. "Alright, now there's fewer enemies." I looked at Zoro. "Our captain is going to kill us." He smirked and walked back over to the group, all of us ignoring Nami as she freaked out on Luffy. Seeing movement I looked up to see Buggy tossing 2 of his men he had obviously used as a shield away. "How dare you flashily try to do me in." Seeing something white pop out I growled as the man that was controlling the lion earlier spotted us. Watching as another pirate appeared, having used the lion for a shield I stopped my growling, feeling sorry for the beast. After some arguing the pirate in the white tried to attack the newest pirate, only for the new pirate to kick him and send him flying towards us, and Luffy to kick him into a wall. All of a sudden the pirate jumped up and landed on a unicycle, speeding towards us with a sword drawn. I, Acrobat Kabaji, Chief of Staff, take on Captain Buggy's anger. As he was aiming for Luffy, Zoro jumped in front of Luffy and blocked Kabaji's attack. "I'll clash swords with you. It's an honor, Roronoa Zoro, to think I would get to slay you as a swordsman myself." I sighed, shaking my head, watching as Luffy tried to talk Zoro out of it. "Hey, Zoro, you should really rest. I'll handle this. Stay out of this." I gasped as Kabaji blew fire at Zoro and kicked him in his injured side. I winced as Zoro fell to the ground trying to catch his breath. "What's wrong? I'm sure I didn't kick you that hard." I growled at him, causing the pirate to look at me as my eyes glowed a bright yellow, my wolf begging to be released. "A werewolf? That's interesting. Watch this little wolf." Acrobat technique murder at the steam bath. He started spinning, using his sword to create a cloud of dust. He brought his sword down, which Zoro blocked only for Kabaji to kick him again. Zoro groaned in pain, as my wolf took over. Shifting in a heartbeat, I took the pirate out from the side, amazing Luffy and myself that I could still fight even being injured worse than Zoro. Bitch. Kabaji grabbed his unicycle, after kicking me in my injured side, and moved to attack me with his sword, only for Zoro to block him. This fight is between us. I whimpered as Kabaji moved to attack Zoro again and cut straight through his injury. Now I'll show you the difference in level between you and me. I shook my head as Luffy told Nami to watch me, who walked away. Turning back to the fight, I watched as Kabaji tossed tops at Zoro, who cut them in half. All of a sudden Kabaji flew into the air, and Buggy tried to grab Zoro only for Luffy to step on his hand and Zoro to dodge out of the way. I sighed, knowing I wasn't much help right now, so I settled for watching Zoro as he finally pulled out his third sword and defeated Kabaji. Before falling to the ground, Luffy looked over at me. Watch after him, Chris. I nodded and limped over to him, laying my head on his back, closing my eyes for a much-needed nap. Chapter 8. Feeling someone shaking me, I growled and looked up at Luffy as he patted Zoro in the head. We're going. I stood up as Zoro groaned and stood up. Looking around, I smiled when Luffy handed me my clothes with a new shirt. Walking into an alley, I changed and walked back over to the group to see Zoro looking like he might faint. No good, out of blood, I don't think I can walk. Hearing Nami make a comment about him not being human. Shaking my head, I grabbed his swords, pulled his right arm over my shoulders and supported his weight as he leaned against me. Are you outsiders? I looked up to see the villagers glaring at us. Yeah, who are you? We're this town's citizens. Lightly kicking Luffy's leg to get his attention since my arms were busy supporting Zoro. Captain, we need to leave, like now. He shrugged me off. Rolling my eyes, I turned and started the long walk to the docks. A few minutes later, Luffy and Nami went rushing past us. Chris, run. I sighed and started running, dodging down an alley, happy to see Chow Chow as he started barking at the citizens. Yelling a thanks to the dog, we finally reached the docks. Climbing into a boat, I winced while sitting Zoro down. Let me see. He sighed and lifted his shirt, watching as I shook my head and he lowered it. You'll survive. Thanks, Doc. I laughed and shoved his shoulder, watching as Nami opened the sail to her boat, realizing it was Buggy's mark. Isn't that Buggy's mark on your sail there? I smirked at Zoro while checking my own wounds, making sure nothing was life-threatening. Well, this is his boat. I'll get rid of it sometime. Hey, wait, youngins. Turning, we spotted the mayor yelling at us. Thanks. I watched as he tossed something white at us. Luffy stretched his arm out and grabbed it, pulling it on board. I laughed when we realized it was a first aid kit. Turning, I grinned at Zoro and motioned for him to raise his shirt. As he did, I easily stitched up his side before focusing on my own wounds as Nami tried to drown Luffy for leaving her treasure on the island. You know, if you kill him, I'll kill you. And your death will be much, much more painful. Nami stopped and looked at me. Do what? You heard me, Navigator. You don't want a pissed off werewolf after you. It'd be reckless to go straight into the Grand Line now. I rolled my eyes, quickly becoming annoyed with Nami. Luffy pulled out the apple he was eating. Yeah, some meat would be nice to have first. Eating nothing but fruit every day is no good. Need some booze, too. I laughed and nodded in agreement. Nami tossed an apple at Zoro, which was caught by Luffy. What are you talking about? That's not what I mean. The Grand Line is the most dangerous place in the world. On top of that, it's crawling with strong pirates after the One Piece. And they're all on powerful ships, of course. We need more people, too. The number of crew members and the lack of equipment on this ship. There's no way we could survive like this. Shaking my head, I stretched out, my legs barely touching Zoro's. Yeah, we need a cook. And a musician. Glancing at Luffy, I shook my head. Why a musician? Zoro started laughing and Nami looked like we knocked her off her high horse. A little to the south of here is an island with people living on it. It'd be best if we can get a hold of a real ship there. Luffy got excited at the prospect of meat. Smirking, I let my head fall back against the railing as we continued to sail along. So, is there anything we should know about you being a werewolf? I shrugged. Nothing to worry about. The only thing that can poison me is a plant called wolfsbane. Full moons I just get irritable, that's about it I think. Luffy spun around and looked at me. What happened when I found you? You were injured. I sighed, knowing this would come up eventually. The reason werewolves aren't seen anymore is because we run in packs, like wolves do. We used to be hunted by hunters, humans who knew about my kind and wanted us extinct, but those bloodlines have been mixed with the Marines. The night before you found me I was with my pack. There were 5 of us and I was second in command under my alpha. We were out for a run, just training for a bit before calling it a night, and we were ambushed by the Marines. I paused looking at my crew members. Luffy was sitting on the edge of his seat, Zoro looked mildly interested, and Nami looked like she was regretting joining us. I was lucky, my paw. I raised my left hand, looking at the faint scar. Was cut with a knife and I was shot in the side. My alpha and pack mates were murdered in front of me. Each one was shot in the head, and I ran, protecting myself at my alpha's command instead of staying and dying. I looked down, not really in the mood to see everyone's reactions. Feeling something hit my leg, I looked up to see Zoro smiling at me. Smiling back, we sat in silence until we reached shore. Jumping out of the boat, I sighed as I stretched. Finally on dry land again. There's a village past here. Yeah, it looks like it's a small one, though. Looking around, I sniffed the air while Luffy asked about meat. What do you smell? I smiled at Zoro. Fresh air. He smirked before focusing on the mountain ledge above us. Careful. I sensed something. Growling, I let my claws lengthen as we waited for a moment. All of a sudden something was being shot at Luffy's feet. Growling, I reached up and cut one of the balls in half, not surprised that the shooting stopped after that. A second later, little black pirate flags with a screaming skull on it popped up from the bushes. So cool. I rolled my eyes at Luffy. Is this the time to be impressed? I growled at Nami before spotting a man standing on the ledge. He was wearing brown pants, a white scarf tied around his waist, a brown tank top, a satchel around his waist, a blue and white striped armband on his left wrist, black hair that reached his chin, a brown headband, and a long nose. I am Usopp, leader of the great pirates who reign over this village. People praise me, and then praise me more as Captain Usopp. If you're thinking of attacking this village, then forget it. My 80 million subordinates won't sit by quietly. I dropped my head in disbelief while Luffy screamed it was awesome. You're lying, aren't you? I smiled as this, Captain Usopp, freaked out as Nami called him out. What's with this character? You got me. Luffy freaked out when he realized this new pirate was lying. Hearing Usopp scream something about his men, I shook my head. You only have 3, you jackass. Zoro laughed as I called Usopp out. Sure enough, 3 kids popped out of the bushes screaming how we saw through their lie before taking off, leaving Usopp all alone. Seeing Nami bend down and pick up one of the balls on the ground. I've never heard of a pirate using slingshots before. Luffy started laughing. You're neat. Hey, you. Don't insult me. I'm a very proud man. Because of my great pride, people call me Proud Usopp. You saw it yourself just now. I raised an eyebrow as he pulled out his slingshot and aimed it at Luffy. My slingshot skills are far greater than your average pistol. Now that you've drawn your pistol, put your life on the line. I smirked, quickly catching onto what Luffy was doing. I'm saying those aren't for threatening people. Hearing a light cling, I knew Zoro had unclicked one of his swords. Raising my hand, I watched Usopp's reactions as my nails extended into claws. Waiting for a few minutes, it was obvious Usopp had lost his nerve as he dropped the metal ball on the ground before falling to his knees. I looked back at the boys, the 3 of us breaking into grins before dissolving into laughter, my claws shrinking back to normal in the process. We stole those lines. I couldn't stop laughing as Luffy explained to Usopp we weren't serious. From Shanks, a pirate I respect. That got an unexpected response of shock. Shanks. You know red-haired Shanks, the great pirate. I looked at Luffy in curiosity, having no idea who the pair was talking about. Yeah, your dad's Yasopp, right? Before Usopp could respond, he tumbled down the mountain, landing in front of us. Yeah, Yasopp is my old man. But how do you know that? I tilted my head as Usopp reminded me of a kicked puppy. Just as Luffy was about to answer, my stomach growled pitifully. How about I tell you over food? Usopp nodded and showed us the way into the small village and to a small restaurant. After our food was delivered, I clinked my mug with Zoro's as we were finally able to get some alcohol in our systems. After a quick swallow, I focused on the food in front of me, digging into the meat and bread, ignoring Luffy as he explained to Usopp how he knew his dad. You know, for a wolf, I wasn't expecting you to have table manners. I glared at Nami as I took a gulp from my mug. I might be a wolf, but that doesn't mean I'm uncivilized. She snorted, saying something about fooling her. Rolling my eyes, I went back to my food, barely listening to the group as they asked about getting a boat. Seeing Usopp take off in a rush, I blinked in curiosity before turning back to my food. Finishing off my plate and my jug, we heard the doors open and 3 kids yelled. The Usopp pirates have arrived. Leaning over Luffy to glance at the kids before turning back to stare out the window. Hey, pirates. What did you do with our Captain Usopp? Luffy patted his engorged stomach. That meat was yummy. The trio of kids freaked out, thinking we ate their captain. Nami and I dissolved into giggles while Zoro smirked at the kids. If you're looking for your captain, we ate him. I could stop from dissolving into laughter. Zoro reached over and patted my back as I had a hard time breathing, I was laughing so hard. We didn't eat him, he left in a hurry a few minutes ago. They looked relieved before saying they knew where he went and offered to show us. Happily we followed them to the mansion that was on top of the hill. Looking up at the mansion, I ignored the kids as they explained about the girl living in the mansion and how Usopp made her laugh. All of a sudden Luffy tried to shoot himself over the gate. Thinking fast, everyone tried to hold him down only for him to shoot us into the air. Damn it, Luffy. Hitting the ground, I growled at Luffy as I forced myself to stand up, grateful I didn't break anything. Shaking my head, I continued to growl at Luffy as he looked up at Usopp, who was talking to a girl with short blonde hair and snow-white skin. I came to ask you a favor. A favor? I shook my head and stopped growling when I heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, I was surprised to see a tall man wearing a black suit, glasses, and had black hair slicked back. You there? What are you doing? I shifted my weight, debating if I should be on edge or not. I don't appreciate you breaking in here without permission. Who's he? I glanced back at Luffy. You got me. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is 1,000 Miles by Angelflutest. Chapter 9. Glaring up at the man, the girl was calling Klahadore, as he impatiently waited for us to take the hint and leave. That can wait for now. I can hear all about your reasons later. Now leave, all of you. Or do you have something to say? Well, actually, we want a ship. I scoffed at Luffy, before turning back to Klahadore. No. Luffy sulked and Zoro clasped his shoulder while I stayed focused back on Klahadore, my senses telling me he wasn't to be trusted. Usopp. I heard Usopp jump and mutter something. I've heard all about you. You're well known in the village. Yeah, I hear you've been on many an adventure. Quiet, impressive for someone so young. You can call me Captain Usopp, too. Since you admire me so much. Captain, huh, I've heard all about your father, as well. I shook my head, having a feeling that Usopp was going to take the bait for a fight and get us thrown out of here. You're nothing but the son of a filthy pirate. Luffy looked up from under his hat. Nothing you do will surprise me, but I ask that you stay away from the lady of this house. Shaking my head, I started to growl at Klahadore as he continued to bait Usopp until it finally worked. Usopp dropped down next to us looking like he was ready to punch Klahadore, which he did, knocking the butler off his feet. Captain, SC, you immediately resort to violence. Like father, like son. Shut up. I smiled lightly, the captain gaining new respect in my eyes as he stood up for his family. As Klahadore got up and started taunting Usopp again, almost getting punched in the face again, only stopping because the girl yelled at him to stop, he growled and left. The kids screamed at Klahadore, who glared at them, and they hid behind Nami and I while Zoro held Luffy back from attacking the butler. You will leave at once too. What's wrong, pup? I sighed, shaking my head as I took a seat on the fence we were next to. That butler, something's wrong with him, I can smell it. Zoro nudged my leg as he took a seat below me, obviously a little surprised I didn't react to being called a pup. What do you mean, pup? I turned and growled at Nami. I'm not your friend Navigator, don't call me a pup when I could tear your throat out with my teeth. She blinked at me while Zoro laughed. But he's been my friend for months now, we only met you 3 weeks ago. She sighed and turned to Zoro, making the right decision to drop it. Where'd Luffy go? Who knows? Probably ran after that, captain. Our captain would be at his spot. We looked over at the kids, quickly becoming bored. I grabbed one of Zoro's swords. Turning the smooth sheath over in my hands before debating if I could hit Nami with it or not. Yeah, the shore. He always goes there when something happens. Shaking my head, I slid the sword back to its spot, watching as the last of the kids ran up to us. Sliding to my feet, I listened as he yelled about a man walking backwards and pointed down the road. Looking up, I noticed the kid was right. There was a man in a blue jacket, green pants, blue hat, and white hair walking down the road. Hey, who's calling me a weird guy? I am not weird. I tilted my head, raising a delicate eyebrow at the man. Seemed pretty out there to me. Don't be stupid. My eyes flashed as he yelled at me, my wolf taking over slightly. I'm just an ordinary, passing by hypnotist. Hypnotist. Awesome. Show us something. Yeah, do something. I shook my head at the kids, pulling my wolf back with ease. What? Don't be dumb. Why should I have to reveal my techniques to a bunch of strangers? He pulled out a circle-shaped blade on a string. Alright, watch this ring closely. Do you believe this guy? I shook my head as I sat next to Zoro. Hypnosis is difficult and requires years of practice. We had a wolf that could help us with shifting, but he had been practicing for 30 years. He nodded in understanding while watching as the man counted to 3, said Django, and everyone fell asleep. I snorted. Obviously this guy still needs training. Sniffing the air, I quickly caught my captain's scent while the others walked up the cliff. Shaking my head, I walked down to the shore. Not surprised to see Luffy face down on the rocks. Looking up at my crew members, I yelled that Luffy was down with me. Rolling him over, I was relieved to see that he was still breathing, asleep, but breathing. Finally the group came down the mountain to look at our captain. Luffy, how did this happen? I rolled my eyes at Nami. Obviously he fell. He's a goner. Glancing at Zoro, I could tell he wasn't convinced that Luffy was dead. As if on cue, Luffy started snoring, causing me to laugh and Zoro to smirk as he walked over and poked him with his sword. Luffy sat up yawning and stretching before looking at us. Morning. Shaking my head, I offered him a hand up, easily pulling him to his feet and handing him his hat. What happened? He sighed and told us everything he saw, about how Klahadore was a pirate and how his crew was going to attack the village and how they were going to kill the girl in the mansion. Wait, I thought you said you were on the cliff, how did you fall? He grinned at us while the kids freaked out. I don't remember. Shaking my head, I shared a look with Zoro. That Django guy we saw must be part of his crew. Hearing a scream, we looked up to see the kids running away. Scoffing, I muttered under my breath. Oh no. We looked at Luffy. What is it? We need to stock up on food before the meat shop guys runs away. I laughed as Zoro hit him in the back of the head, causing him to fall over. That's not the issue at hand here. Zoro looked up at me, a question clear in his eyes. Guess you were right about that butler. Any ideas on how to stop him? I paused before nodding. We need to find Usopp, assuming he knows this island as well as I think he does. The group nodded and we started walking through town. I sniffed the air, a light feline scent catching my attention. I'll be back. Zoro nodded, watching as I walked away, following the scent to the shore. Stopping at the edge of the water I couldn't see anything, but I could tell something wasn't right. Chapter 10. Sitting on top of the slope I watched as the sun began to rise, vaguely wondering where my crew was. All of a sudden a ship with a giant cat on the front came into view. What? My wolf began stir at the prospect of a battle, allowing my claws lengthen as I realized my crew was more than likely at the wrong entrance. Walking down a few steps I waited as the ship hit the shore and dropped anchor. Rolling my neck I watched as the pirates ran off the ship. Running forward I started taking them out, grateful when I saw Usopp appear and started shooting his slingshots at the pirates. One pirate took advantage of my distraction and struck me in the head only to have a good amount of muscle to be ripped out by my claws, but his blow caused a ringing in my ears. Shaking my head, it didn't take much to realize Usopp had said something stupid that the pirates didn't believe. All of a sudden the pirates charged again and I moved, easily taking out 3 of the pirates before something hard and sharp hit me in the head. Whimpering I pulled it off and threw it at the pirates before moving again, growling when one of the pirates managed to cut my arm with his sword. Something happened behind me because the pirates started rushing the shore again, one of them hitting me in the chest with a rock tied to a stick, knocking me off my feet and the rest of the pirates to trample me. Whimpering I was in shock to see the pirates go flying overhead. Sitting up I grabbed my chest, trying to catch my breath. Turning I spotted Luffy, who had tears in his eyes, and Zoro, who looked ready to kill someone. Standing up I flicked my claws so some of the blood would come off. What were those unchallenging guys just now? Don't look at me, I'm not satisfied, though. Zoro turned to Nami. Nami, how dare you kick me down there? Luffy glared at Usopp. Usopp, you jerk, you didn't say which way was north. Walking over to the group I smiled at the pair. It's about time you two showed up. They smirked before looking at my battered and bruised state. What? The pup couldn't handle this fight on her own. I growled at Zoro in warning as he smiled at me. I fight better when I have backup. Wolves are pack animals, remember? He nodded while I turned back to the group of pirates. Watching as Django pulled out his weird pendant again. All of a sudden the pirates caught their second wind and seemed to be getting stronger. This could be a problem. Zoro grabbed the back of my shirt and pulled me back. Get back, we'll handle this. I growled but let him move me anyway as Luffy charged with flying fist. Don't growl at me. I'll growl if I want to. Hearing a crack we looked up to see Luffy trying to destroy the ship, only for Django to put him to sleep, and the part of the ship he had pulled off to land on top of him. You sure you want me out of this battle? Since our captain's out. Zoro sighed and shook his head. Fine. I grinned and gave a light yip in excitement, my wolf wanting nothing better than to kill the one that dared to hurt the man that saved us. Seeing Django moving I growled as he called 2 pirates dressed like cats from the boat, one skinny and the other fairly large. They caught sight of Zoro and cowered back, sniffing the air. I growled. What is it? The skinnier one charged and attacked Zoro before I could warn him. In the blink of an eye the pirate had 2 of Zoro's swords. With a smirk he tossed the swords away and Zoro cut through the pirate to get his swords back. The pirate turned and jumped on Zoro's back, holding his arms so he couldn't move them as he sat on his back. You're up, Butchie. Get him. I growled as the larger pirate ran and jumped, almost landing on Zoro who somehow managed to throw the smaller pirate off and roll away just in time. Shaking my head I looked at Nami who was supporting Usopp. With a simple nod I shifted, Usopp's mouth dropping as Nami let go of him and grabbed my clothes before going back to Usopp while I turned to the trio and patted over to Zoro, sitting next to him as he crouched watching the pair closely. Nice of you to help pup. I growled in warning, waiting for the pair to either notice me or try attacking again. Zoro stood up and I did the same, the fur on my neck sticking up in aggression. Finally the pair jumped to attack Zoro. While he blocked them with one sword I ran past them to retrieve the swords. Just as I picked up both swords in my mouth I heard a scream. Turning I saw Zoro sitting down with 6 giant claw marks on his chest. And 2 seconds later after he yelled at Usopp the pair charged again. All of a sudden I felt something sharp slice through my side. Dropping to the floor I whimpered as I realized Django had cut me with his blade and was staring at Clawhador as he looked down at everyone from his spot at the top of the mountain. What is all this? Chapter 11. Yelling. Over what I didn't know. Raising my head I watched as the 2 pirates Zoro had been fighting rushed at Clawhador, only for him to disappear and reappear with strange-looking gloves on that had long, obviously sharp, blades attached. There it is. The pussyfoot maneuver. I looked up at Django before looking back at Clawhador who was now holding the 2 pirates. Struggling to my feet I was taken back at the amount of pain that sparked from my newest wound. Crouching down I listened as he told the pirates they had 5 minutes to kill us or he would kill them. With a low growl I picked up the swords again as the pirates charged Zoro. Forcing my body to move I ran up and threw the swords up in the air so Zoro could catch them and I could run back to watch the fight, knowing to jump in only when it became necessary. Looking up at Nami, I growled lowly and nodded my head, watching as she nodded and dropped my clothes down to me. Easily maneuvering my clothes so they were on my wolf form before shifting back and adjusting my clothes so they fit right. Already making the decision to fight their captain myself, I smirked as Zoro defeated the pirates in a heartbeat before sighing as Zoro threatened Klahadore. "Zoro, I'll take over if you can't handle him." He nodded in understanding before facing the captain again. Seeing the larger pirate was back on his feet, and was hypnotized again, I sighed as Zoro dropped the sword in his mouth in shock before regaining his composure and kicking the sword up and catching it in his mouth with more flair than what was really necessary, though impressive all the same. Sharing a look with Zoro, I took the hint and moved to hopefully wake up Luffy, who was going to be needed. Just as my foot collided with my captain's face, I heard Zoro yelling for me to look out. Turning, I spotted a blade shaped like a ring and dodged backwards as Luffy made the mistake of standing up and got hit in the face in the process. Standing up, I smiled when he straightened up and broke the blade with his jaw. As the pieces of the sword fell, Luffy poked his cheek and screamed in pain. "Damn it, Chris. That hurt." I smiled, grabbing my side I realized had torn open further from my dodge. "I'm sorry, Captain, I needed to get you up though." He blinked, taking in my bleeding side and shoulder. "You're bleeding." I shook my head, slightly touched at his concern. "It's nothing, Luffy. I'll be okay." He nodded and walked over to the pirates. I smirked and followed behind him, knowing this was a fight I don't want to miss. "Chris, get somewhere safe. Now." I blinked at Luffy, surprised by the sudden command in his voice that left no room for arguments. "Yes, Captain, if I'm needed I'm stepping in." He nodded once while I turned and climbed the cliff, easily finding a ledge that was only a few feet from the ground but was large enough to sit on. Looking around, I realized the girl that Klahadore wanted to kill had arrived and was trying, unsuccessfully, to reason with her ex-butler. I watched as the girl had the guts to pull a pistol on the pirate captain. Granted, she was shaking, but it was impressive for someone so young. Klahadore grabbed her pistol and dropped it on the floor, only for Usopp to grab it and point it at him. In the blink of an eye, the pirate was behind Usopp and had his claws surrounding Usopp's head. Seeing that Luffy had enough, I jumped down just as Luffy stretched his arm and punched Klahadore, or Kuro as he called himself, in the face. Smirking at Luffy, I turned to walk towards the captain. "I think I'll take him, Luffy, you can have Django." He smirked, watching as my claws extended to their full length, a full 5 inches past my fingers. Seeing the kids appear and start hitting Kuro in the face while he was down had me running to the top of the slope. Just as the kids stopped and faced Usopp, Kuro stood up, releasing a low growl as he kicked Usopp, not realizing everyone had stopped what they were doing to watch as I swiped my claws at Kuro, knocking him to the ground. "Those are real claws, Kuro." He smirked, standing tall and looking down at me. "Such control, you must be a werewolf, only a pup though, but still a rare creature." I smirked, crouching low. "You seem to know quiet a bit. Let's see how much you know about my kind." I smirked as he started that strange technique of his, twirling. I blocked his claws as we continued to face off, neither of us really gaining the upper hand, only pausing to block the other before we were off again. "If you weren't injured, you would be a strong opponent." I smirked. "If only you could fight as well as you talk, then we would have a fight." His smirk grew wider as he slashed at me, causing me to duck and roll to the side, forcing my feet into his abdomen, cursing when he grabbed one of my ankles and lifted me off the ground. "Oh little pup, you have so much to learn. Too bad your life has to end here. You would have made an excellent addition to my crew." With that, he raised his free hand and cut into my abs and back before dropping me in a bloody heap. Whimpering, I refused to scream as the pain pulsed through my body. Watching him turn to Luffy, I could tell both my crew members were ready to kill Kuro. Feeling hands on my shoulders, I looked around to see the kids trying to drag me away from the danger as Django started walking up the hill, only to be stopped by Zoro. As the kids dragged me over to the grass, I sat up, wincing at the pain, watching as the large pirate we forgot about jumped up and caused an earthquake that broke the ground apart. 2 seconds after a cloud of dust blocked my view, the pirate had Zoro pinned against a mountain. Seeing Django was supposed to kill Kaya, as Usopp called her, sighing, I turned to the kids. "Get her out of here, leave the pirates to us." "But, do it." They gulped and nodded before grabbing Kaya and dragging her away. As Django drew his blades again, I forced my legs to hold me up, prepared to stop him, only for Usopp to hit him in the back with one of his slingshots. Growling, I felt my legs shaking as Django sighed and tossed the 4 blades, each one connecting with my arms and legs. Falling to the ground, I felt my wolf urging me to stay down. Watching Django walk by, I blacked out as he kicked my side hard enough to send me rolling before he turned to find the kids and Kaya. Zoro's POV. My heart stopped as I watched Chris roll down the slope, stopping a few feet from me. I could hear Usopp talking, but my attention was on the wolf at my feet, her body bloodied and bruised from the fight. Reaching down, I gently picked her up, relieved to see that she was still breathing. Maneuvering her so she was curled into my side with one arm before picking up Usopp, who claimed he couldn't move, and throwing him over my shoulder. Turning, I realized Luffy was going to get revenge for both Usopp and Chris. "Luffy, me and Usopp are gonna chase that hypno freak. That a problem?" "Nope. Keep Chris safe. Hurry." I nodded and started walking. Thanks. I'd actually be much faster by myself, but they're inside some woods. I'm gonna need your directions to catch up to him, and find a safe place to put her. Hold it, you two. Who gave you permission to pass this hill? I smirked as Luffy punched Kuro, telling us to go. With simple nod I headed into the woods, hoping we wouldn't be delayed and that Chris would wake up soon. Chapter 12. I listened to Usopp's directions as I picked up speed through the woods, trying not to jostle Chris too much as she started to whimper in her sleep. Hearing screaming I sighed, realizing we were running in the opposite direction. Seeing the hypno freak trying to strangle Kaya, sighing I dropped Usopp and placed Chris down on the ground, telling Usopp to watch over her before taking off at a full run. With a soft whimper I blinked my world into focus to see Zoro running at Django. Sitting up I gasped in pain, trying to watch the fight only to see Zoro walking over to me. What happened? He smiled at me while he tied his bandana around his arm. You passed out, come on, better make sure Luffy didn't die. I laughed and let him pick me up, a little surprised how comfortable he was. Just relax, pup. I nodded, turning my attention to the cuts on his chest. You sure you should be carrying me? You're still injured. He smirked as we exit the forest. I'm fine, you're the one we need to look at though. I nodded as we found Nami and Luffy. What happened? Usopp saved Kaya and knocked out Django. She nodded before turning to a large bag filled with treasure. Shaking my head I relaxed as Zoro sat me down. After a few minutes Luffy woke up saying he was hungry, and we decided seeing the local doctor wouldn't hurt. Leaning on Zoro, my pride keeping me from letting him carry me again. As we walked into the little building the nurse looked at us in shock for a moment. I'll go get the doctor. I laughed as she scurried away. Finally a short old man walked in, took one look at us, shook his head, and led us through a short hallway to a large examination room that made me nervous. So, who wants to go first? Everyone looked at me causing me to sigh and sit on the little table, lifting my shirt up to reveal the extent of my injuries that had been hidden. Thankful for my wolf blood, allowing me to heal faster than most people. The doctor smiled and grabbed a jar with a thick green lotion in it. I hissed as he rubbed the freezing liquid into my wounds. I missed the light blush on both Luffy's and Zoro's faces while the doctor wrapped my waist before focusing on my shoulder, forearms and calves before telling me I would fine. Hoping down I nudged Zoro to go. He sighed and took off his shirt. I winced at the large cuts. Grabbing his shirt I inspected the tears, holding back a laugh as the doctor used the same lotion on him cause him to flinch. When Zoro was given the okay he walked over and grabbed his shirt. Turning we stared at Luffy who seemed to pretty much be healed. Well, that should keep you all healthy. Now, about payment. We looked over at Nami who sighed and handed the doctor the money we owed him before going back to the diner we had eaten at before, deciding one last fresh meal wouldn't hurt. Sitting next to Nami and across from Zoro we decided on a new plan on where to stop at next when Kaya walked in and approached our table, looking much healthier than she did yesterday. Here you are. We smiled at her in greetings. Are you okay to be out of bed? She nodded. My sickness this past year was caused by the mental dismay from having lost my parents and Usopp really cheered me up, too. I can't stay coddled forever. You've done so much for me. Thank you. I've prepared a present for you from the bottom of my heart. Please accept it. I raised an eyebrow before we looked at each other and nodded, deciding to follow her and see what the present was. We followed her to the shore to see an actual ship waiting for us. Wow, can we really have this? Yes, please use it. I grinned, walking over to Kaya and hugging her. You have no idea how much this means to us, thank you. She smiled and hugged me back before I stepped back, looking at the ship in awe before I heard screaming. Looking up we saw a giant green ball rolling towards us. Usopp, what's he doing? I shrugged as we watched. Let's just stop him for now. He's on a collision course with the ship. I smirked as the boys placed a foot out to stop the bag, effectively kicking Usopp in the face. Shaking my head I turned back to the ship while Usopp explained he was going out to sea. Climbing onto the ship I grinned and looked at everything while the guys got the ship ready to sail. Walking back on deck I smiled at the boys as we finally set sail. With a wild grin we clinked our mugs together as we toasted the new ship and new crewmate. So, what are you? We laughed as Usopp was looking at me in curiosity. I'm a werewolf. His mouth dropped before he closed it and nodded once in understanding, not bothering to ask anymore. Chapter 13. Looking up at the darkening sky I sighed, feeling restless under my calm exterior. Hey. Looking over I smiled at Luffy as he walked over to me. Hey. He looked up at the sky while I turned my focus on the water. It's a full moon tonight. I nodded, my wolf starting to paw at my mind. Are you sure you have control or whatever? I looked over at him, still surprised by the amount of concern he showed towards me. I do, I might have a couple of blackouts during the night. My wolf isn't one to stay quiet for very long. But usually nothing bad happens. He nodded as we fell into silence for a few minutes, just enjoying each other's company for a little while before he decided to go to bed leaving me on deck with just Nami, who was steering the boat in the right direction of the nearest island. As the moon began to rise my wolf became more restless, like she did every full moon. Shaking my head, I decided sleep would be a good idea as my body jerked with her rage. You okay, Chris? I smiled up at her while walking to the door that lead below deck. I'm fine, just the moon. I'm gonna turn in. If you get too tired, come wake me or one of the guys up, okay? She nodded while I disappeared below deck, easily finding our room that was across from where the boys slept. Walking in, I sighed as my wolf continued to fight me. Carefully stripping down, I let myself shift before jumping into one of the hammocks and under a blanket, trying to relax as my wolf raged below the surface. Sighing, I had to remind myself that I didn't want to kill my new friends, trying to calm my wolf down who clawed at my mind with sharp claws, demanding I let her take over for the rest of the night. Shaking my head, I looked out the window to see the moon was high in the sky. I jumped down and sat on the floor, my tail flicking behind me in annoyance before I sighed and stood up. Walking out of the room, I looked around before deciding to push open the boys' door, smiling when I saw everyone asleep. Padding over, I checked on Usopp first, who was dead to the world. Turning, I went to Luffy, whom I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be able to wake up if the ship was sinking. Walking over to Zoro, I was surprised to see he wasn't asleep like the other two. Hey Chris. I tilted my head to the side, surprised when he reached over and petted my head between my ears. Why are you up, pup? I looked up at the ceiling before focusing back on him. Full moon, huh? I nodded, my wolf calming down a little with the contact. Hearing the door open, we looked over to see an exhausted Nami poking her head in. Zoro, can you take over for a few hours? Yeah. I moved as he got up, following him back on the deck and sitting by his feet, sighing as he patted my head again. You okay? With the moon? I nodded, looking up again at the sky, surprised by my wolf that was now calm. Letting out a yawn, I glared at Zoro as he laughed. Go get some sleep, pup, you need it. With a light pat on the head from Zoro, I shook my head and patted downstairs, slipping back into my hammock and falling asleep. Lying back on the railing, I watched the clouds go by, ignoring Usopp, who was playing pirates or something. Hearing Luffy scream, I almost jumped off the ship at the sudden noise. Now that Usopp's joined and we have 5 people, we need our own mark. I looked at the flag he was holding only to shake my head and lay back down. It looked like something a kid had drawn. That's our mark. What do you think? Nice, huh? Rolling my eyes, I watched as Zoro tried to let him down easy. A pirate flag is a symbol of death. A symbol of fear. Sitting up, I watched as Usopp drew his mark, which we quickly shot down. Finally he perfected Luffy's mark. It looked pretty good, a skull and crossbones with Luffy's straw hat. After we had Usopp paint the same symbol on the sails, we felt the wind pick up. Looking up, we saw huge, dark, storm clouds that could be a problem. Are we sure we're going the right way? Nami grabbed the binoculars and looked at the island. That's it. That's the place. No doubt about it. I looked at her like she was crazy, not seeing anything special about it. Do you see anything? She nodded at Luffy. The legendary treasure island. I tilted my head, deciding it would be a good idea to get off the railing since we were slowly approaching the storm. The legendary treasure island. I've heard of that. I rolled my eyes. I don't care what it is, we are headed right for the storm. 2 seconds later we were in the middle of a storm. Grabbing one of the ropes, we tried to keep the sail under control while Nami maneuvered us to the island. Climbing onto the shore, I scratched at my arm at the feeling I got off the island. Looking at the strange plants, I walked a little closer to the group, not wanting to get separated. You're a werewolf, how are you scared? I growled at Usopp, who jumped as one of the plants opened up, revealing razor-sharp teeth. This is one creepy island. I rolled my eyes and kept walking as Nami told the story of the island. Shaking my head, I laughed as Zoro decided to take a nap. Hearing a twig snap, I looked over to see a cross between a rooster and a dog looking at me. Well, aren't you cute? He barked at me before walking away, watching the strange animals walking around for a moment before a voice was heard somewhere above us. I am the protective god of this island. Leave this island at once if you value your lives. I growled lowly. Protective god? You guys pirates, aren't you? Yeah, pirates, just as I thought. I sighed, sniffing the air. I could smell who was trying to pass himself off as a god. Just try taking another step into the forest. I smirked and took a step. Ooh, I took a step. What are you gonna do, oh powerful god? I smirked up at the forest while the creatures stepped forward. With a low growl, I smirked as they took a step back. Taking a seat, I decided I was tired of this game and started poking Zoro with a stick, trying to wake him up. All of a sudden, wooden spears were thrown at us. Rolling back, I easily dodged the spears and kicked a couple from landing on my crew member that was somehow still asleep. Watching Luffy get hit in the head with a boulder, I laughed when it didn't faze him in the slightest. How are you all right? I looked behind Luffy and spotted a bush that seemed out of place. There you are. Don't move. I gasped when Luffy was shot in the chest. Grateful bullets don't work on our captain. The bush screamed that we were monsters and took off running. Deciding to wait for everyone to come back after they tracked down the bush, I sat against a tree, laughing as a panda mixed with a bat flew over and sat on my knee. You're not so scary, you know. Cute, but not scary. It tilted its head before taking off with the rest of the animals. So much for that. Seeing movement, I smiled as Zoro finally woke up. Morning, sleeping beauty. Where is everyone? I shrugged and pointed the way they were headed. Off that way I think, we should find him, don't want to be lost in this forest. He nodded and we started walking, eventually finding our crew near the shore with a man who looked stuck in a treasure chest, no doubt the man that had tried to intimidate us earlier. I laughed as Zoro grabbed Usopp's cup, sat down on a rock and finally spotted the guy and fell over, causing me to laugh harder. Who's this guy? He's a guy stuffed in a treasure chest. I gave Luffy a look before taking a seat, shaking my head when Zoro made a stupid comment about being sheltered as a child. Yeah, I've been overly pampered since I was just a little boy, of course I'm not. Watching Luffy and Zoro trying to pull the guy out of the chest, I growled in warning, causing the pair to stop. Who are you guys? You're nothing like any of the other pirates who've come here. Luffy took a seat while smiling at the guy. I'm Luffy, the man who's gonna be king of the pirates. Naturally this disturbed the strange man. What? I'm gonna be king of the pirates and get the One Piece. The One Piece? Don't tell me you're seriously planning to enter the Grand Line. We even have a chart of the Grand Line. I sighed as Luffy held up the chart. Don't take it lightly. That place is hell, or a graveyard. With a low growl I stood up. So we have heard, over and over again. Sensing a pointless argument I started walking. Where are you going, pup? Away from this. Zoro sighed as I walked into the forest, surprised at how calm the creatures were. Hearing a howl I stopped in my tracks and listened closely. It couldn't be. Hearing the howl again I took off running, passing a giant cliff in the process. Using my nose I had a feeling I was right on my suspicion. Stopping in an open field I blinked as a growl ripped through the air, causing my knees to shake at the power. A werewolf, I thought I recognized the scent. Hearing another growl I smiled when a tall man with white hair walked out, his green eyes looking at me in curiosity. Hi Daddy. Chapter 14. Hi Daddy. Chris. I nodded, running over to hug him, practically purring as he wrapped his large arms around me, burying his nose in my hair. Why are you here? I smiled. I'm a pirate now Daddy. A pirate? I nodded. Let me explain. I was with David's pack, we were attacked, and Luffy, my captain, saved my life. I owe him my life Daddy. We were sailing and decided to check this island out. He sighed, his age showing in his face as he took in my appearance. You're happy with this lifestyle? I nodded, smiling up at him. Would you like to meet them? I think we're leaving soon, I don't want to be left behind. You can come with us, if you want. His smile softened as he hugged me again. No matter how tempting that is pup, I'm needed here, but I would like to meet your crew. I grinned and started showing him the way, following my nose back to the shore, listening to my dad as he explained how hunters had captured him, how he escaped and made a living on the island. It was clear to me, seeing the wild look in his eyes, that he didn't have full control over his wolf anymore. Keeping calm I grinned when we reached the shore. With a soft yip I took off running over to my crew, smiling when Luffy hugged me quickly. Where did you go? I smiled as he let me go. I smelt something, and you're not gonna believe who I found. Who? I turned and smiled at my dad, who was obviously having a hard time hiding the rage he felt. This is my dad, Kiba. Daddy, this is my captain Luffy, our navigator Nami, and my crewmates Zoro and Usopp. My dad forced a smile and shook hands with Luffy. So, you're who my daughter couldn't stop talking about. I blushed when he turned to Zoro, obviously the two were sizing each other up. Daddy, we really need to get going. He turned to me, pulling me into a hug while looking at the guys. I'm letting my daughter go with you on the condition that you protect her. I kissed his cheek while the guys nodded, flinching a little when he growled in warning at them. I'll see you soon Daddy. He nodded. Be safe Chris. I nodded and started walking towards the ship. Come on pup. I nodded at Zoro. Hey, you with the green hair, I want to talk to you. I turned and gave my dad a look. Be nice Daddy. I will, I just want to say something to him, go get on your ship. I nodded and climbed on board with Nami, Usopp, and Luffy, watching the pair closely from the ship. Finally my dad seemed happy and they shook hands before Zoro walked over and climbed back on the boat. I watched my father wave at me before shifting into a giant white wolf and took off running into the forest. Turning I smiled up at Zoro. What did you and my dad talk about? Nothing pup, don't worry about it. I growled before nodding and walking downstairs to see what all Kaya had packed for us. Searching Nami's and mine room I was surprised to find 2 chests full of clothes. One for Nami and one for me. With a grin I decided to try and get some color on my skin, so I changed into a simple, black halter top shirt that stopped a few inches past my breast, and a pair of black shorts. Grinning I walked back on deck and laid down a few feet from Zoro who was passed out. Relaxing I heard Luffy drop something heavy on the deck. Keeping my eyes closed I listened to my crew for a few minutes before fully passing out. Come out, you damn pirates. I jerked awake, looking around in pure confusion for a moment before spotting a man with black hair, was wearing a blue jacket and a purple shirt, and he had the kanji for sea tattooed on his face. What's your problem? He glared at me about to say something when Luffy appeared. Who are you? Shut up. Who I am doesn't amount to crap. I sighed as he moved to attack Luffy, who dodged with ease. Finally Luffy had enough of the strange man wrecking our ship, so he threw him into the wall. Looking down I watched as Zoro appeared. Hey, Is that you, Johnny? Who's saying my name all familiar like? He seemed to recognize Zoro. Be big bro Zoro. It is you, Johnny. I tilted my head in confusion at the reunion. Where's Yosaku? Isn't he with you? I jumped down next to the swordsman, looking between the two in annoyance. You two know each other. Go put some clothes on Chris. But, I sighed at the look he gave me. Fine. Walking inside I grumbled and cursed at Zoro while stripping down and pulling on a pair of loose-fitting, black pants, a pair of black boots and a purple tank top. Just as I was walking back to the deck, still grumbling to myself, when I heard cannon fire. Cursing I ran to the deck to see a marine ship next to us, and a fancy-looking ship in front of us with a giant flume of black smoke coming from it. I leave y'all for 5 minutes and you destroy an innocent ship. The guys flinched at my outraged voice. We didn't mean to. Why are we here? To look for a chef. I sighed and shook my head. Watching as Luffy climbed onto the goat's head and was preparing to fling himself over to the boat. Where are you going? To fix it. I shook my head and watched him go. He's an idiot. Yep, let's see what trouble he's in. We nodded at Nami and climbed down to the little boat tied to our ship. Rowing over to the dinning ship we heard a loud bang. Tell me that wasn't Luffy. Everyone glanced at me before we pushed open the large, red-painted, double doors. Needless to say we were in shock to see a blonde wearing a black suit and had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth holding a man in a white suit with pink hair and tanned skin by the throat a few inches off the ground. Sniffing the air I almost covered my nose at the strong irony smell of blood. The blonde started speaking and I was taken back by his voice. Don't waste food. At sea, provoking a cook is the same as committing suicide. Remember that. Chapter 15. Ah, our customer, you again, Sanji. What are you doing to our customer? I turned and spotted a waiter with tan skin, a pink scarf, blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up revealing strangely muscled arms, and a white apron. He must be a waiter. Zoro scoffed next to me as we watched him approach the blonde waiter, we now knew was called Sanji. What is it, you damn cook? I blinked in surprise. I stand corrected. Nami nudged me as we continued to watch in curiosity. Restaurants can't exist without customers. Hurting our precious customer, what do you think you're doing? I shook my head, deeming the cook annoying. What's the big deal with customers? He treated the food carelessly. On top of that, he insulted the cooks. With that he dropped the marine, who was no doubt in pain, to the floor. So I taught him a lesson. I smirked, liking Sanji already. Hearing the marine saying he was going to shut the restaurant down I shook my head. This, naturally, pissed Sanji off more as veins appeared on his forehead. Then I'd better finish you off here. I watched as Sanji walked back over to the marine. It took 3 of the chefs to hold him back, and they weren't doing a very good job. A screaming match started that made me tilt my head slightly in pain as the chefs yelled at Sanji as he yelled at the marine. As Sanji started to pull away from the chefs a crash ripped through the arguing as Luffy and another chef with a big hat and a peg leg fell through the ceiling. We found Luffy. Zoro scoffed. Oh boy, what now? I glanced at Usopp before turning back to the confusion. Watching the chef stand up I shook my head as Luffy looked up at the enraged chef. Finally the chef, or owner as the other chefs kept calling him, started yelling at Sanji, asking if he was going on a rampage in the restaurant again, to which he responded by calling the owner a geezer. As another argument started I was surprised when the owner kicked Sanji in the face with his peg leg, before turning and kicking the marine in the head. Hearing a new argument break out I covered one of my ears, the noise playing hell with my hearing. All of a sudden a marine walked into the restaurant and yelled at the captain that they had trouble, screaming that some pirate's underling escaped. This sent everyone in the restaurant into a state of panic, even more so when the marine was shot and the pirate stood behind him. Watching him walk in I took a step forward, watching him with curious eyes as he took a seat at one of the tables and propped up one of his feet on the table. Everything's fine. Bring me food. This is a restaurant, right? Seeing the blood on his face I tilted my head, watching as the strange chef walked over to him with the biggest, cheesiest smile on his face. Welcome, ya damn crook. I'll say it only one more time, so listen good. Bring me food. Sir, I'm terribly sorry, but do you have money for that? I growled lowly, feeling my claws lengthen slightly as the pirate pointed his gun at the chef's head, asking if a bullet would do, to which the chef made a snide comment. With a calming sigh I walked over to the table, catching everyone's attention. I'll pay for his meal. I turned to the chef, who looked ready to snap. Or is my money no good here? He smirked, about to say something when the pirate turned to me. Thank you, but I can handle him. I turned to look at him. Are you sure? He nodded, causing the chef to smirk and hit the pirate before kicking him in the stomach as I stepped in. Do it again, and I will end your pathetic life. My eyes flashed dangerously with my threat, the chef taking the hint and taking a step back. Turning I noticed that the pirate was crawling out the door. Smirking I walked back to my crew, ignoring the mixed looks I was receiving. That was risky. That was fun. I smiled at Zoro as one of the waiters approached us. How many? 4. He nodded and showed us to our table. One look at the menu and I started drooling, desperate to eat great food again. After ordering I smiled as the waiter poured me a glass of red wine while my crew members drank water. Why did you order wine? Because I enjoy the finer things in life. Nami snorted, saying something about a civilized wolf to Usopp that had me rolling my eyes and tossing my napkin at her. Be nice, hey look, it's Luffy. Everyone looked up to see Luffy walking down the stairs, Nami calling him chore boy, and Zoro saying we had heard he had to work for a year. Shaking my head, I went back to sipping at my wine before savoring a bite of the bloody steak on my plate as Luffy threw a fit about us eating without him. How could you? I covered my laugh as the crew laughed at him. That's our business, right guys? I rolled my eyes at Zoro, scoffing at Luffy as he picked his nose and dropped it in Zoro's water. Shaking my head as Zoro almost drank the water before shoving it down Luffy's throat, who fell to the floor. Needless to say, we caught a lot of attention. Half a second later, Sanji was in front of Nami and I offering roses to us. Oh, dear ocean, I thank you for today's encounter. I blinked in surprise, discreetly sniffing the rose, surprised to find it was real. Oh, loves, I can't bear this hardship. Go ahead and laugh at me. I started giggling while Nami was still in shock and Zoro looked ready to slice Sanji to pieces. I'm now prepared to be a lowly pirate or devil if I'm with you too. Gently taking the rose, carefully pushing my hair behind my ear as I sniffed at the delicate flower, closing my eyes at the fresh scent. Listening as Sanji continued his little speech. However, how tragic it is. There's too great an obstacle between us. That obstacle is me, right, Sanji? Looking up, I wasn't surprised to see Owner, who seemed to snap Sanji back to his normal self. Damn geezer. This is a good opportunity. Why don't you become a pirate with them? You're no longer needed at this restaurant. Tilting my head, it took me all of 2 seconds to figure out Luffy had asked, probably demanded, that Sanji join the crew as our chef. As Sanji turned to the Owner, I felt a weight around my waist. Looking over, I was a little surprised to see Zoro had sat back down and had placed his arm around my waist. I smiled lightly at him before going back to sniffing the rose as Sanji argued with the Owner. So just leave this restaurant. Say what? If I keep quiet, you just shoot your mouth off, huh? You damn geezer. The rest I could overlook, but I'm not just gonna let you trash my cooking. No matter what you say, I'll stay here as a cook. I blinked in surprise as Sanji grabbed the Owner by the collar, only for the old man to grab Sanji and throw him into our table, where everyone moved fast enough to save their dishes. Shaking my head, I went back to my food, watching as the Owner walked away and Luffy patted Sanji's shoulder. All right, you have permission. Now you can become a pirate. Sanji quickly replied with a no before fixing our table. Now, sorry about that. I started laughed as he poured Nami some wine and handed her some fruit before filling my own glass, calling us his princesses the whole time. Nami played into his game with confidence while I chose to be a little shyer and faked a blush. Usopp got in Sanji's face while Zoro sat seething in his seat, until Usopp told Zoro to beat Sanji up. Do it yourself. Nami was quick to play the damsel to stop the fight while I shook my head. Stop. Please don't fight because of me. Grabbing my sides, I started laughing as Nami got our meal free, well, not the boys. Luffy took a seat next to Zoro and started laughing only to be kicked in the head by Sanji. That impressed me, until he dragged Luffy back to the kitchen while I tried to stifle a growl. Well, he can fight. Yeah, I smiled at Zoro before finishing off my plate. Looking around at the fog, I whined, not liking how I couldn't see very far. Sitting on the deck, I looked over at Zoro, who was leaning back and watching me, raising an eyebrow as I continued to look around, feeling completely out of my element, hiding a blush as the swordsman patted the spot next to him. Walking over, I took a seat, playing with the hem of my black pants. Problems? I nodded. It's just, I get nervous when I can't see. It's an instinct thing. My wolf likes to be able to see any enemies that could pop up. He nodded, his eyes lingering on the rose in my hair. I had decided to leave my hair down and had tucked the flower behind my ear. Didn't know you liked roses. I laughed at him. Just the scent, it's calming. He raised an eyebrow before remembering whom he was talking to. Hearing splashing, I stood up, growling lowly as I was able to make out a ship. We have a problem. My crew members looked at what I was looking at, a giant ship that had ripped sails, giant pieces missing off the boat. Watching the boat with caution as 2 of its passengers boarded the restaurant. Can you hear anything? I shook my head at Nami. I don't know what it is, I just can't. As we waited, I was starting to get anxious. Hearing a gunshot, I growled as people started pouring out of the restaurant. Hey, what the hell is going on in there? I shrugged at Usopp, grateful when the fog started to clear and I could see clearly again. We'll see when we go in there. I glanced at Zoro, realizing for the first time that he was standing right next to me. It's strange though. Zoro looked down at me as my eyes focused on the ship. There's almost no sign of life on that ship. What do you want to do? I sighed, thinking about my options. Watching as smoke exploded from the restaurant. With a growl, I shifted before anyone could react and jumped onto the other ship, running along the boards until I could safely jump down to the restaurant. Hearing gunshots, I ducked under the door to see a man with purple hair wearing gold armor and had on a brown cape. Walking around him, I was surprised to see the Owner placing a giant bag in front of the pirate. Saying something about 100 meals. Staying hidden, I knew my priority was to protect my captain. Chapter 16. Listening to the pirate talk about the owner of the restaurant, I padded over to Luffy, smiling as he patted my head, his attention on the pirate as I looked around, spotting Sanji sitting on the stairs. Feeling Luffy move away, I looked over to see him pointing a finger at the pirate, claiming he was going to be king of the pirates, shocking the chefs around me. I sighed and padded to stand slightly in front of Luffy, vaguely listening to the argument I've heard several times by now. Growling, I felt the fur on the back of my neck rise as the pirate's armor lifted and revealed several guns. Crouching down, I was preparing to attack when I heard the clink of a sword being unsheathed. Looking back, I smirked at Zoro and a shaking Usopp, that was no doubt dragged into the fight. Gonna fight, Luffy. Need a hand. If you don't need help, though, that's fine too. I scoffed at Usopp while Luffy was fully surprised. Zoro. Usopp. You stopped by. Don't worry. Just watch from there. He looked down at me. I can handle him, go wait with Zoro. I growled lowly in annoyance before nodding and walking up the stairs, stopping at the bottom of the stairs looking up at the injured Sanji before hearing the clink of the pirate's armor closing. Turning, I watched the pirate raise the bag of food over his shoulder before leaving the restaurant. Walking around Sanji, I walked up to Zoro, smiling when he handed me my clothes. Pulling my clothes on before shifting and smiling at him. Thanks. He nodded before walking past me. Rolling my eyes, I followed after him, ignoring the looks I was receiving from Sanji and the chefs who had witnessed my shifting. Smiling at Luffy when we reached him, snorting as Sanji lit a cigarette, taking a moment to adjust to the smell. That nose of yours is something. I laughed at Usopp, watching as the owner yelled at the chefs, something about Sanji. I wasn't really paying attention as Sanji stood up and kicked a table off the floor so it landed on all four legs before taking a seat on it. Listening as Sanji announced he would kill anyone who tried to take over the ship, to which Luffy told us he was cool. Easy, Luffy. Rolling my eyes, I walked outside, knowing we were going to have to fight that pirate and his crew. Sitting on the deck and sniffing the air, sighing at the salty scent of the sea was mixed with death and blood from the pirate ship, not surprised to see our little ship gone. Stretching my back, groaning when it popped, a sudden relief rushing over my body as I sensed the discomfort and excitement of my crew. Hearing screaming, I looked up in surprise. Standing up, with one last look at the giant ship, I turned and walked back into the restaurant, ignoring the gunshot that rang out. Hey Luffy. The entire restaurant looked up at my calm voice. The pirates are up and moving, thought you should know. He was about to say something when the sound of something sinking started. Turning, I was surprised to see the giant ship sinking in 3 pieces. Rushing out the door, I gasped as the ship continued to sink. Big bro. Big bro. I looked over to see Johnny and another man swimming towards the restaurant. Running over with Luffy and Zoro, we helped them onto the ship as Luffy and Zoro realized our ship was no longer with us. Where's the ship? I smirked as the boys explained how Nami left us. Told you she wasn't trustworthy. The boys looked at me like I was crazy while I smirked at them before a strange scent hit my nose. Looking up, I growled lowly at the small boat approaching us. The black sail was rolled up. A man with a giant sword strapped to his back was the only passenger. Who the hell is that Hawk? I'm a hawk. Zoro looked down at me. How do you know him? I sighed. He and my dad fought once. Zoro looked dumbstruck for a moment. As I turned to watch the ship, I blinked as Zoro walked past me, grabbing his white sword. Wait, you can't be serious. Zoro paused, glancing back at me as the chefs and Luffy watched us. I know you want to be the world's greatest swordsman. But pick your fights, last I checked you can't cut a ship in half. Zoro glared at me before jumping onto the other ship. He's going to die. What? I turned to Luffy. You don't have any faith in him. I sighed. Yes I do, I just know when he's outmatched. Hawkeye is the greatest swordsman on earth. Zoro isn't to that level yet. Turning, I approached the owner of the restaurant. Tell me you have a first aid kit around here. He nodded and pointed towards the kitchen. With a simple nod, I walked into the kitchen, quickly locating the little white box before walking back out onto the deck to see Zoro bleeding and holding his arms out, his swords on the ground, and Hawkeye sliced through him. Zoro. As Zoro fell into the water, I grabbed Luffy's vest and hung on as he shot himself towards the other ship, dropping in the water as Luffy hit the ship. Throwing Zoro's arm around my shoulders, I started swimming to the small boat Usopp and the boys were on. Spotting Zoro's sword, I reached over and managed to secure it in the back of my shirt before continuing the short swim. As I reached the boat, Zoro's friends dragged him onto the boat while Usopp pulled me on board. Catching my breath, I smiled as Usopp handed me the first aid kit before pulling the sword out of my shirt. With a growl, I shoved Zoro's friends away as they crowded him. Give him room, guys. Checking his pulse, I smiled, yelling at Luffy that Zoro was alive, unconscious but alive. Sitting back, I watched as Zoro opened his eyes and raised his sword. Luffy, can you hear me? Yeah. Rolling my eyes, I moved to stitch up my friend, again, shoving Johnny away as he tried to help. Did I worry you? You need no less than the world's greatest swordsman, right? I sighed as he coughed up blood. Zoro, stop talking. I will not be defeated ever again. I sighed as Zoro started to tear up. Until the day I defeat him and become a master swordsman, I'll never be defeated. Got any problems with that, King of the Pirates? Nope. Smiling, I asked Usopp to help me push Zoro up. Just hold him still. Got it. Grabbing the gauze, I wrapped his wounds before we set him back down. Luffy yelling that we should go on without him and retrieve Nami and the Going Merry. I'm gonna kill that bitch when we find her. Usopp smiled at me. You can kill her after we return her to Luffy. Deal. Chapter 17. Curling into a ball, I relaxed in the sunshine, smiling as the sun warmed my fur. Hearing movement, I looked up to see Zoro sitting up. Hey. I raised my head, ears perking up as he reached over and patted my head. Tilting my head, I raised an eyebrow. I'm feeling better. I nodded, laying my head back down, watching him as he moved about the ship, Usopp standing at the wheel. Shaking my head before standing up and walking around the small ship. After a day at sea, I decided it would be better to stay in my wolf form than deal with the Zoro's two friends in my human form. Patting over to Usopp, I growled as Johnny tried to pet my back. Sitting next to the sharpshooter, I looked around for a moment as he reached down and patted my head. Spotting an island coming into view, I padded below deck, quickly changing into my clothes from a few days ago. Walking back to the deck, I paused to see Zoro tied down. What did I miss? These two idiots won't attack the island. I laughed as I took a seat and pulled on my boots. We should attack, Zoro and I could take them. Feeling something hard hit the back of my head, knocking me out for a few minutes. When I came to, I was tied next to Zoro and the two idiots were gone. I'm going to kill them. Get in line. I sighed, laying my head back in silence as two creatures, that looked like mutated fish, hopped onto the boat and looked at us. It's just these two, maybe they floated in from far away. Yeah, that's what happened. I sighed as they untied us and retied our wrist behind our backs. We sat in silence as the fishmen navigated the boat into the bay, yelling for the people inside to open up, that they had prisoners. Resisting a growl, I let the two fishmen pick me up and placed me on the concrete dock next to Zoro, who didn't look very happy. Looking up, it didn't take long to figure out who the captain was, the man with purple skin, a swordfish's nose, razor-sharp teeth and gills on the side of his neck. What are you doing on this island? We're looking for a girl that we know here. Zoro smirked at my light voice. The captain turned his attention to Zoro, obviously thinking he was the biggest threat. One more time, what was your purpose in coming here to this island? Like she said before, we're looking for a girl, you fish bastard. I smirked at Zoro. Wow, for someone I'd consider a good meal. You're either really stupid or you've got a lot of guts in there. We fishmen are simply the next rung of the evolutionary ladder from you pathetic humans. We are incredibly resilient. We can breathe both on land and underwater, an ability which clearly establishes our physical superiority over you. I don't know if this will make any sense to that puny brain rolling around in your head, but fishmen are the lords of all creatures and to fight against us is to defy nature. Rolling my eyes, I knew it wouldn't take much to knock this guy off his pedestal. As I was contemplating shifting or not, a voice brought me back to the situation. I'm really sick of listening to your big ideas, Arlong. I looked up and growled as Zoro gasped as we saw Nami walking towards us. Why are you always so serious, Nami? You know that I wasn't talking about you. You are a very special human, our greatest navigator, and a valued member of this crew. You always have been. I growled lowly, drowning out Zoro as Nami approached us, as she knelt down in front of us, making the mistake of turning her back on me as my eyes flashed in rage. Jolting forward, my teeth sank into her shoulder, causing the human to scream and the fishman behind me to yank me off the navigator. Bitch, I will kill you. You don't double-cross your captain like that. Before I could do anything else, Arlong stood up and looked down at me. Wait, I looked up to see that the fishman above me was ready to kill me. A werewolf? You can't be more than a pup. I growled lowly as Zoro looked between me and the captain. What of it? He smirked and tossed something at the fishman behind me, who shoved the bag into my mouth and used a band to gag me. As soon as the bag hit my tongue, I knew I was in trouble. The spicy toxin was wolfsbane, the only lethal poison to my kind. Coughing, I tried to get the gag off as Zoro pushed himself to the water. Turning, I looked at the water in curiosity, knowing my crewmate had a plan. Sure enough, Nami went in after and pulled him back on land to keep him from drowning. Shaking my head, I tried to get the gag off, feeling the burn of the poison all the way to my stomach as one of the fishmen picked me up and dragged Zoro and I into the giant building, grunting as my back landed on a cold hard floor. Glancing over, I noticed Zoro was next to me, feeling tears spike up as my airways started to clog up. All of a sudden the gag was gone and I was coughing the poison out. What was that? I coughed as the swordsman looked down at me in worry. Hearing the door open, we looked up to see Nami walking towards us, a knife in her hand. Without a word, she walked over and cut us loose, telling us to leave and that Arlong would be back soon before tossing Zoro his sword. Feeling a hand on my back, looking up, I continued to cough, trying to catch my breath. Chris, what do you need? Water. He nodded and helped me up. Walking out of the building, he left me by the water, leaving me by myself for a few minutes before returning with 2 glasses of water. Nodding, I used the first one to rinse out my throat and the other I swallowed in just a few minutes. What the hell happened to you? Wolfsbane. It's a poison, deadly if it's in my system for too long. Chapter 18. Looking around in mild annoyance as Zoro relaxed behind me, After it was discovered we had escaped, several of the fishmen had come to kill us, only for Zoro to kill them while I focused on healing and getting the poison out of my system. It's official, we are going to die of boredom. You got that right. I laughed lightly, trying to keep my opinions to myself at seeing Zoro in an unbuttoned blue shirt he had stolen from one of the fishmen. Hearing someone talking to themselves, we looked at each other before walking over to the wall. Climbing the wall, we looked down to see another fishman that was part octopus with 6 arms. This is strange. It sure is. I tried not to laugh as the fishman, who wasn't all together in the head, looked up at us. Hey, who are you? Speak up now. The fishman pointed to himself as if we had asked him the question. Me. Well, I'm Hachin. Call me Hachi. I giggled at the strange creature. Zoro shook his head. You a fishman, too? Of course, of course. I'm an amazing octopus fishman. It looks to me like you two are just humans. I snorted. Yeah. Zoro glanced at me and I started laughing again. A marine, or possibly a guest. A guest. I spoke up, smiling at the creature as Zoro looked behind us at the dead fishmen. Yes, we're guest. Arlong isn't here, is he? No, we were hoping you might know where he might be. The octopus looked up at me and smiled. Apparently, there's a long-nosed outsider running all over this place, so Arlong locked up his friends here, then went to Kokoyashi village to hunt down that pesky troublemaker. I smiled at Zoro, who shook his head. Has to be Usopp. Hachi. Which way is this Kokoyashi village? We jumped down to the fishman's level as he pointed at a floating pot in the water. Get in. What? You are a guest. I'll take you there, swordsman and pretty lady. I smiled and stepped into the pot with Zoro's help before he joined me and Hachi took off. Reaching the village, I thanked Hachi as he jumped in the water and took off. He's a strange one. Definitely. Can we keep him? Zoro gave me a look before walking into the village. Wait for me. He smirked as I ran to catch up to him, looking around in curiosity at the town. Everything had been flipped upside down, including the road we were walking on. I turned my back on Zoro for 2 seconds and he was already attacking one of the townspeople. Turning around, I watched as Zoro started running. With a sigh, I took off running after him. What's wrong? Usopp was captured and taken back to Arlong's park. We have to hurry. Of course.